I just wanted to let you know that the volume's muted on the chamber, so we can't hear. I can't hear you. I think it's the volume on there it is. There, you got it.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We start over?
Yes, sir, if you don't mind.
No, no worries. Okay. We'll call to order the Olivet Planning Community Design Commission for meeting for March 3rd, 2022 to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Rob Jurgel,
Present.
Carol Wagner,
Present.
Jody Rich here, Rich Brophy,
Present.
Brian Lewis,
Present.
Dan Rosenberg,
Present.
and Tim Spiegelglass.
Present.
Let it also be known that Councilmember Missy Waldman, our City Council Liaison, is in attendance, as well as Carlos Trejo, the Director of Olivet's Planning Community Development Department, as well as Don Doty, Senior Planner, and Bridget Walters, Administrative Assistant, who's online via Zoom, as well as Barb Sondag, the City Manager, and I believe she's on via Zoom as well still. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did I miss anyone?
No, sir.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming. You know, I thought, now that everybody's in attendance here, we'd make it a little smoother, but of course, we always have a few little hangups here and there. So appreciate everybody in attendance, and this is good to see everybody with a full house here. So thanks everybody for coming in. Just like to go over kind of our commission procedures. We'll have an opportunity for public comments, and we ask that if there's anybody in the audience or who's on via Zoom, if they do have public comments that are not related to an agenda item, that you please come forward, and we do ask you that you state your name and address for the record. And we do ask you that you minimize any of your comments to no more than 3 minutes to respect everybody's time and to make sure we get everybody's opinions heard. If you do have a public comment and you're attending via Zoom, please raise your hand. There's a button on there, and then Carlos can bring you online. If you do have a public comment that's related to something that's on the agenda item, we ask that you wait. As we go through the agenda items, there'll be a staff report. There'll be some discussion among the commission members with it, and then we'll bring on the petitioner and have some further discussion. After we've gone through that, then we'll ask for public comments as well, before we take any votes, if we take a vote on a particular item for tonight. Carlos, did I miss anything?
No, sir.
All right. Let's check. Is there anybody in attendance here that has a public comment that's related to something that's not on the agenda item?
Chairman, I do know that there are about 9 individuals that are online. And again, if anybody wants to speak to in regards to a planning or land use matter that's not scheduled on the agenda, if you can show your hand, it's kind of located in the lower part of the central bar on the Zoom window. And Chairman, I just asked if you can give it a minute, just in case.
Yes, ma'am. That it's maybe related to the agenda item? Now's your time. Ask for a public comment at the end of the meeting for you. That's no. No problem. We'll come back to you. How about that? No, no worries. We're friendly here. So try to be friendly.
All right, Chairman. There, I have nobody that's online that wishes to speak in regards to a non-agenda item. And then again, if the floor is open, if there's anybody that wants to speak, if there's an agenda item that you'd like to speak, we ask that you wait till we go through those processes. And again, there'll be another opportunity towards the end of the meeting.
All right, sounds good. Let's move on to old business, and we'll go on to item A, Olivet Townhouses redevelopment project for various properties off of Dealman Road. Petition type is rezoning, including conceptual master plan for site plan review, preliminary subdivision plat, and communities design and concept stormwater reviews for a 2.824 acre townhouse development consisting of 35 units. Petitioner is Doug Cohen with Douglas Dealman LLC. Property owners various that are currently that are under contract. Carlos?
Okay, Chairman, as you're aware, this item was initially introduced to the commission on January 6, 2022, and then the formal submittal and petition process started on January 17th, 2022. It's been in our past two agendas for review. It is a request to rezone that 2 acres of property across the street from the city center to build a 7-building, 35-unit townhouse development in there. You've had previous staff reports, and the February 17th report is posted online. You have the latest updates distributed to you this afternoon in your packets. The existing grounds are 2.8 acres, consist of 8 single-family lots, with 6 of the lots being improved and 2 of them being vacant. And that area is kind of nestled between north of the Jiffy Lube facility, of course, down the street here, up to the Castle Gate attached home development to the north. In the staff analysis, and we've gone through several scenarios and views on that, on the development. Comments from February 17th were the developer meeting with the neighbors. The petitioner is here, and he can provide feedback regarding to the comments and concerns that were expressed. We're still awaiting county and MSD approvals. In there, the petitioner's team is here, and they can address that. There is the request to ensure that we have that cross-access easement. And there, they'll address that in the updated plans. We've had discussions with them regarding the on-street parking. I think they found a solution, and they're designed to accommodate at least 6 additional stalls in between the courtyards where the buildings face each other. This limited the interruption to the fire lane access, which is now a full 20 feet all the way across. They've relocated the trash bins in order to provide a full transitional yard buffer, and they've illustrated the screen wall along the west property line that's required by code. The streetscape design was discussed at the February 17th meeting. An explanation was given to the changes to that central stairway on Dealman. And the next thing would be that, that needs to be reflected on the revised set of plans. I think they have those addressed in the latest that we received this afternoon. There was some questions about material finishes. I think there was an understanding regarding to those retaining walls and also some of the basement exposures. I think that's been addressed. Developer has provided a estimated cost, and what we were looking was really just the value of construction and how much improvement, how much investment is being made in the city, and you have a breakdown in there. And again, that's a $15.8 million investment in there, as we've seen quite a bit of investment along the Olive Boulevard corridor, and we're trying to keep track of that investment as the city continues to be an attractive place for redevelopment in there. They have a construction schedule that's been laid out. I provided that in your packets. And then specifications on the light fixtures and retaining walls, those were submitted today, this afternoon. And there, I'll let the petitioners discuss those items in there. The primary thing, I think, from our end is, again, is awaiting some type of comments from county regarding the access points. And they've kind of noted, the county being behind, and so in that process, but it's very important. We had an issue here in our city center in terms of where our access points were going to be. We also had restrictions placed even for the emergency vehicles. So I would be more comfortable once we know that the two access points for this site are going to comply with the county's requirements. And that's pretty standard. I mean, the county, just like our codes, has written numerical criteria to figure it out. And if they meet that, I'd like the I like that assurance that they've met those county standards, if they haven't heard from the county. But since January, this was forwarded to the county. In there, so having some, I'm still a little concerned about that, only due to the experience that the city's had with this facility. Be glad to answer any specific questions. The petitioner and his team is here to provide the a review of the updated plans. Chairman, what's up?
Go ahead, Carol.
Carlos, I have a question. Tonight, we're considering a possible rezoning, is that correct?
Yes,
Can we approve the rezoning contingent upon the county's okay? Or do we just either approve or disapprove?
that's up to the commission. I don't know what type of precedent you want to set in there. The key goal here is, again, this was brought up in January. If the county is that slow in that process, we'd like to know, and also I asked the commission, we want specific assurances that the county standards have been applied to those 2 aprons. There's a numerical approach, it's dimensional and all that. So it either is or isn't. And we want to hear that assurance. What I do not want is that the county be told that the city says this is where these entrances have to be, because that's not our design. That's the petitioner and his team's design. So we don't want to be wedged as a reason of what, that the county, that we're a holdup or causing a thing. There's been more than ample time to get this issue addressed.
So what is your recommendation then at this point?
My recommendation has been consistent since the January 6th meeting is, had they received preliminary approval from the county regarding the aprons?
So do you think it would be wiser for us to delay action until?
Well, I want to hear from the petitioner's team. I would not say that at all.
Okay,
There's been more than ample time, though, to get a response.
okay.
If I may, one other point of clarification, we're just recommending approval to the city council, right? We're not approving it here tonight.
Correct. Your action or motion would be to recommend to the city council the rezoning, acting on the preliminary development plan that's been provided here, which includes those apron points.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, good. Well, I think we're ready to hear from the petitioner unless there's any more questions or comments at this time. Nope. Nope.
No, you'll have to press that.
As a reminder, just make sure you state your name and address, for the record. That'd be great.
Good evening, everyone.
Multitask here, so I'm going to change the camera position so the speaker can be heard.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, bear with me 1 second.
In the meantime, maybe you could just state your name. And
Sure.
address.
My name is Tyler Stevens. I'm with Corta and Architecture. Address is 4501 Lindell Boulevard, St. Louis. I'm largely here tonight to answer questions that you all have. And I know that certainly this first question has come up with regard to MSD and the county. I can tell you that with all developments like this is pretty standard. MSD and the county are 2 entities that act on their own timetable. And it is very common to get approval with a contingency on final approvals from those entities. A lot of times they await final civil plans that are fully developed and worked out, and those don't happen until we're later on in the construction document process. So we will be in continuous talks with both MSD and the county in terms of the final civil plans. I'm sort of speaking on behalf of the civil engineer tonight, but that's how it normally goes.
Have they seen some of your preliminaries?
Yeah,
plans?
the civil engineer has already met with both of those entities.
Did they have any
give them-
comments related to your aprons or anything?
Not
like that?
yet. They've not received anything.
Okay, but in their conversations that they've had, have they had any issues that they were concerns that they brought up?
I was not part of those meetings, as I'm not the civil engineer, but I know that the civil engineer has not mentioned, he was not concerned about any of it. Not mentioned anything that they brought up as an issue.
Okay,
I mean, for the most part, one of the things they look at is we have, I think it's 8 houses right now. There are 8 curb cuts along there, and we are reducing that down to 2. So in their mind, that's a big benefit.
right. If you don't mind, if you could just kind of go through and summarize kind of the changes to the plans, that
Sure.
have happened since the last meeting, that would be great.
Well, we did meet with, I was part of the meeting with the neighbors. And we did meet with them, and most of that discussion had to do with the back screen wall along the back of the property. We have a retaining wall that goes along there, and then there was the screen on top of that as well. We discussed that at length. We showed pictures of the standard screen wall that the city requires, which is the kind of plastic rock fence thing that you see up here on the mobile gas station up on just down the street here. That's the city standard. And so we showed them what that's going to look like and showed them that that does run the whole way. I think the confusion mostly had to do with the retaining wall. Their properties, it's very hilly, both on our side and theirs. And so some of the houses, most of the houses sit higher than our development. There are a few at the end of the far north side that sit lower because their street falls off a whole lot, almost sinks down to a hole at the end of the cul-de-sac there. So explaining to them who's going to see what, most people will just see the screen wall fence. That's what they're going to see. Behind that is all of our landscaping. And then behind that is our retaining wall, which actually faces our side, not theirs. So they're only seeing that fence. Down on the low end, there's the fence, which then the landscaping is behind that. And then our retaining wall is behind that, but it faces them. However, in that particular zone, it's just going to be 10 feet of landscaping that no one will ever see because it's screened by their screen wall and the retaining wall on our side. So we kind of got all that straightened out. The other big change that was made had to do with the trash, and that is, of course, relates to that back area. We had trash enclosures that were carved into our retaining wall because that's a nice way to hide them. However, that violates your thing. We were hoping for just an exception on that, but that turns out to be more difficult. So we moved them to the end of the drive aisles. So now between each of the buildings, there's a drive aisle that comes down that serves all of the garages. We put the trash receptacles at the end of that drive aisle with built into the front retaining wall. So still carved in, same kind of approach, but now it's up in the front of the building rather than in the back. However, that drive aisle does sit below grade by, I think that retaining wall is at least 6 feet tall in all locations. So it's still pretty hidden. That's the new location that you'll see there. The parking, there at the mail stations in the back, we carved out as much parking as we can get, staying out of the fire lane, making sure that we've had the 20-foot access. The rest of it was just information that we provided with regard to materials, specifications, various things like that, the schedule and the cost.
Okay, I did receive that email today. Is that something you guys are going to go through, or
What email are you?
the email with the plan revisions? The commission doesn't have those or hasn't seen those yet. So I'm assuming that's what's going to be presented. The one that came in at around 3 o'clock from Amanda.
Okay.
So I can share they can share the monitor screen, or I can
I
download.
believe Amanda is online. Are you
Yes.
not, Amanda? And if there's anything that
Yes.
that
So
I
I'm gonna-
missed in going down through there that's in that email, if you would like to go ahead and walk them through that, I think it'd be better coming from Amanda than it would be from me.
Okay,
Yes, Carlos, these are the old ones, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
that's why I was confused on the trash.
Oh.
All they have is the layout I got on Tuesday, the revised layout.
Oh,
So they haven't seen.
So everything I was just describing to you, you're not looking at.
Correct.
You're going
Correct.
off, oh, okay, I thought I had it in front of you, sorry.
There was no way to try to
Mind's eye,
print
but not
that.
our
I can,
actual-
I can do shadow puppets and do various
Did you-
things.
Did you get to chat, I'm sorry, Chairman,
Go ahead. No.
did you get to chat with the neighbors about lighting as well? That was an issue.
We did talk a little bit about lighting. The lighting, the fixtures that we're talking about are very standard street lights that, and they're not like a parking lot light that spreads light all around. These are directional street lights. So they're purposefully put on the west side of the back street, on the neighbor's side, in other words. So the pole is closest to them and the light fixture comes off of the pole to the east, pointing towards our development. That throws all of the light eastward. If you look at the lighting, what's it called? The graph that shows all the light study, the photometric chart, yeah. You can see that the fall off of the light is pretty tight against that curb. And then when you throw in there the 10-foot
Okay, Amanda, you should
landscaping
fix that.
and the 6-foot screen wall, on top of all that, there's virtually no light will spill into their yards. And we did walk them through that as well.
Really quickly, if I may, those lighting plans that we've seen, does that take into account the color and reflectivity of the materials like on the exterior of the units? White, brick.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure that I know the answer to that.
Because that's something that's not clear from here. And it's one of the things that they've said is an exception to the results that they have, that are qualifying it based on the information they've received. So we get some information about what information was provided to them about those finishes and
Yeah.
activities.
Although I guess in regard to that, I don't know the answer to that in terms of photometric study, but just thinking through it logically, again, there's in the backyard of the neighbors, and this is what we were describing to them. They're looking at a 6-foot high solid fence.
Right.
Behind that is 10 feet of landscaping trees that are pretty dense according to the city standards. So our buildings then, you can't even see the first floor of the buildings themselves. I guess the very top of them,
That's
you
what I'm
would
concerned
see a
about, is
little
this,
bit.
like glistening obelisk. There are two things.
Yeah.
One, that issue, I think we should make sure that we've got the finishes and activities set appropriately for that study. But two, you may be aware of this, we're not allowed to enforce those plantings.
Mhm.
So they can come, they can go, they can change in the winter, maybe they'll be gone. So I'd like to understand that lighting plan also, what assumptions were made regarding those plantings. And I'd be curious to know if the numbers changed drastically if those plantings were removed,
Mhm.
just because we don't have control over maintaining them. Does
Sure.
that make sense? Am I articulating that well?
Yes, yes. Although the plants largely are only going to be seen by this development because the screen wall hides them. But
Light does crazy things.
sure, we will not be using glossy paint if that's what you're referring. I mean, yes, it is a painted brick, but generally any paint we put on an exterior building is not glossy. It's a flat paint because it looks bad if it's glossy, honestly.
I understand. My point is just, you're gonna be painting it white.
Right.
I don't have enough information here to render for myself in my mind, what everyone's gonna see and what the sight lines are. So I think it'd be helpful to make sure those lighting studies are mindful of these things.
Amanda, do you know the answer to that question in terms of the lighting study, if they took into account the reflectivity of the buildings or the landscaping?
I don't believe they took into account the reflectivity of the materials. That's not typical, these photometric studies. They had that information available to them, but I think it's more about the fixtures, the placement, and the spread, kind of irrespective of some of those qualities. To my knowledge, anyway. Are you seeing the drawings, by the way?
Yes, they're up.
I mean,
I'm happy to walk through those.
the only other thing I'd say about light fixtures, I mean, the photometric study is done at ground level because the light is directed downward. It's not projecting out. It's not like a billboard kind of
I
light or
totally
something like
understand that. My point is just that if, this is all hypothetical because I don't have the renderings in my mind, but if I'm standing in the backyard of one of the neighbors, and they can see over the fence and see, for example, the second story of the structure, and the structure is painted white, and there are lights pointed in any way such that it reflects off that white building, they could be staring at a giant white wall.
Yeah,
So
well, if you look at the drawing that's up on the screen there, you can see the height of the light fixture, which is 16 feet tall,
Pointing down.
and it's all pointing down. I don't see how any light could possibly go up off the second floor. The second floor is higher than the light fixture.
yeah, I don't want to get into a physics discussion. I can explain how that might happen,
Well,
but my
sure.
point is just, I think we need to make sure that those things are accommodated. And the other comment I was going to make is, I think it'd be useful to have some more renderings of this from further away. That like the front page of the packet that we have shows the front of the development, but doesn't really show anything past the first unit. So we don't have a sense of what it's going to look like truly on the street looking at it. So I
You
think
want
we-
us to do renderings from the people's backyards looking at the building?
Yes, I do. I'd like to see that and some more from the front street. We're talking about, don't be dismissive of my comment.
No,
which is what
I
I'm getting
wasn't.
from
I
your-
wasn't. I was
what is
thinking
what I'm
about
getting
it.
from your body language. This is a big change for what we do, and it's different from a lot of the other developments that we have in the city. We just want to be careful and protect the residents. So
Sure.
it's not too much to ask for a couple of renderings, which I can do.
No,
with
it's
my-
not at all. We've done this before. We've done renderings like that, and I will happily do them for you. And
Okay.
what you will see is a bunch of trees.
Well, but-
Which
but,
I
like,
can do.
Again, my comment was remove the trees and what does it look like?
Well, the
Because-
trees are on the neighbor's yard, in the neighbor's yards, though. I mean, you want to do it with no trees.
Trees die.
The,
Yeah, afterwards, but let's still continue going through.
I want to just interject one time. Doug Cohen, Douglas Dealman. In regards to that question, I think if Carlos can answer me, I know in other municipalities, there's inspectors that come around. So when you say trees die, yes, trees die. I come from Suburbia Gardens. My father was 50 years in the planting business. And I would think that when a tree dies, that I don't even know. But I know in other municipalities, like in Clayton, where we have developments, they have an annual inspection I know that Olivet has an in-house inspector that inspects houses that are just not being turned over, but just inspected. And he would, I assume, flag a tree that is dead to be replaced.
We don't have a tree.
There's no tree ordinance, but you can't have a dead tree on your site, and that's a hazard.
No,
you
but you
can.
can take the tree down. if It's died. and
I think
there's-
it's more about maintenance, and if something goes bad, there's no way to enforce it and what's gonna happen.
So, I mean, this is $15 million in my name on it. I've spent $50 million in this community over the last 22 years. Why would, this is my name on this project, which means the world to me. We're not going to do something that I'm not proud of. I have relationships with everybody. If I could fill this small seating area with people that live in my homes that would call me, they've been in the home for 3, 4, 5 years. There's not a home. I built 200 homes, 60 in this city alone. There's not a home that I couldn't knock on the door on and say, hey, let's go have coffee. And same thing from them to me. My reputation precedes me. This is going to be a landmark development to change the city. We're not going to let any trees die. If a tree dies, we're going to replace it. We've met with all the neighbors. And I'm looking forward to seeing this through in the standards that I'm accustomed to.
And Doug, I don't mean to impugn your reputation at all. I know you have a great reputation in the city. I think you have a good reputation in the city. My point is just that for us to approve this, for me to approve it anyway, I'd like to get a better sense of what this looks like from some different perspectives, from further back, and also to make sure that these residents who have expressed concerns about lighting, that we explore that fully. And I think all I'm talking about here is, you plop a render camera in the backyard pointed towards the development, do some renders of what we're going to see from their perspective, and do it during day and night, and you can simulate where the light bounces and see what it's going to look like. I think that would give me in particular, maybe everyone else, maybe it's just me, a sense that it's designed in a way that's, if I were living there, I'd be comfortable looking at that and have it be fine. So I don't mean to impugn your reputation. I'm just saying our job here is to assess these plans, and some renderings from some of these different perspectives would help us give the seal of approval.
If you're looking from the back and you're asking for a rendering from the west, and you say remove the trees, but the trees, why would I remove the trees from a rendering when they're going to be there?
Because we don't have any way to enforce that
I
the
do.
trees are there. You may
Right.
sell the property to someone else. Any number of things could happen. We
What do you mean
can't.
sell the property to someone else? What does that mean?
No, our,
In
I
50
think
years, what
it's,
Yeah.
I think it's with our standards, or not our standards, but the policies, is we're supposed to not consider landscaping, as, with the architectural review.
I don't understand that, but
Am I right? Or am I
why
wrong?
have a
Kelly?
landscape ordinance if it's not part of the package? I don't
No,
understand.
but we're supposed to not necessarily look at the landscaping issues to address, things of, what's-
My understanding is that once the property is approved and built, we lose any opportunity or jurisdiction to say anything about the landscaping on the property. So the plans can say plant trees. This is hypothetical. I'm not suggesting you're going to do this, but just to make a point. The plans could say we're going to have a bunch of trees here. We approve it. You plant the trees. The building is finalized. The next day you come and cut down all those trees. We can't do anything about that.
Don't you think that's a flaw in the ordinance?
Well, that's a bigger issue than we're here to resolve today. But the fact of the matter is I don't look at the trees when considering these plans, because those things change. Ownership changes hands. The amount of dollars to maintain things changes, and suddenly we have no trees, and it's a different perspective. So all I'm saying is I'd like to see it without the trees, both the lighting plan and the design, so that we're comfortable that in the worst case landscaping scenario, it still looks okay.
Yeah, I disagree with you, but
Moving on.
The only thing I want to say more about the lighting itself is the way that, Carlos, can you put that cross section up?
Sure, right now they.
Looking at this cross section and seeing where the light is and pointing down, you could get some reflectivity off that building. But it seems to be more likely to be bouncing back onto the road itself and lighting up, the road in those particular spots.
That may very well be. My point is just, it takes a couple clicks to render an image from back there at night
Yeah.
to see where that
I
light's
don't.
going.
I would highly disagree with that couple clicks comment.
I can do that at home in 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Well, then you must
If you
have
can-
better software than I do.
If you can do this, you can show me a night landscape with the lighting and how it's going to look from the neighbor's yard. Given the size of this development, I don't think that's unreasonable, and the concerns the neighbors have expressed, it's not unreasonable.
Well, my point is it's a little bit of work, sure. But my bigger point is that it seems like every time we come, there's something new that we're asked to show. And we provide the new thing, then we come back and then we're asked for something else. We asked Carlos for a list of everything you all wanted to see, a definitive list, so that we could get it all to you. And yet here we are again, and there's something new. So that's my bigger issue.
One quick thing on this, because it's starting to get in a circle. The list that I provided was what's required in the code. So I just kind of rewrote the code sections and sent it to them. When the submission is fully compliant with the code criteria, it's sufficient information so the commission can do its review. Doesn't mean that if you do all this, that the commission approves it. I'm not aware of any community that functions in that way.
No, you're right.
Okay,
But. the
so
commission-
that list was put in there. And again, all I did was go through the code, rewrote it, and then sent it over.
Okay, maybe we
And
should-
then the revisions were submitted today at 3, correct? Okay, and I haven't had an opportunity to go through it, but the commission has a copy of that list. And they have if the commission was to consider an action, that list is attached as conditions for the approval.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we keep moving on? Maybe Amanda can go through the drawings. If we need to come back and revisit this, we can, but let's just see if we can kind of keep going through. See what we have. Amanda?
Amanda Norris, Corten Architecture, 4501 Lindell Boulevard. So I'm just going to walk sheet by sheet. You're welcome to pause me at any point and ask a question. So the cover sheet obviously has the rendering that we've been discussing and some of our general information. Then we get into our civil sheets. I'll probably breeze through these more and focus on talking through the architectural site plan changes that Tyler had summarized. Those are reflected here as well on the civil. I'll just point out a few things as I'm going through. So these are more
One of the things on sheet 1 was the requirement for that cross-access easement. I noticed that the civil didn't show it in there
where would that be
on the
put
north
on
side.
the- Well, so I noticed that
There's a note there.
it gets labeled here.
Correct.
How would it have been? Would it be a narrative on here that you were looking for, or?
Could be shown as an easement. That essentially will reflect the preliminary subdivision plat that the commission is going to act on in conjunction with the rezoning request. Again, it's noted in the sheet and it can be a condition of the approval. But if it specifically states on sheet 1 to provide the cross-access easement.
Okay. By chance is Ryan, since we can't see other attendees, I was curious if Ryan from
Yes,
Bowles
yes.
is-
He's got his hand raised, so maybe. he can-
Perfect.
Hi, this is Ryan from Bowles Incorporated, the civil engineer on the project. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Carlos, the first thing is regarding the cross-access easement. I think this was discussed last time and Tyler explained that, we fully intend to provide this. You just mentioned a moment ago that what is shown here is not a subdivision plat, so to speak, and no cross-access easement has been created or recorded. Obviously, that will be done as we get into the improvement plans with this project and everything. So I did include a note on the site plan sheets that we, fully intend to provide this. And I guess I would ask if it can be a condition of an approval. I don't see why that wouldn't be okay from our end. I don't know exactly what you wanted us to show on the cover sheet, but that's how we handled it because we don't have an easement in place this time. We intend to grant it, but that'll come, as the project progresses.
And the goal here is to, facilitate and expedite for the petitioner that sheet 1 of the civil set will be the preliminary subdivision plat for any boundary adjustment or re-subdivision of the property. Again, if we don't do that, then they'll be coming back with with a similar diagram for commission approval. Again, if we're looking for ways to make this process more efficient, this has the potential to serve as a preliminary subdivision plat.
Okay.
That's one meeting.
Understood. To along those lines, then maybe I'll speak with you after how you would like me to show that. If you want me to go ahead and show, a narrative, or if, with the legal on it, or if we need to show exactly on that site plan right there, and that can be sufficient for the subdivision plat, I guess.
I think because essentially you will be submitting some form of plat. In here, we're
Correct,
still not
yes.
sure
Uh-huh.
if these are going to be simple fee ownerships or this is just going to be a boundary adjusted parcel with 35 units in there. But this would be a good means to show just that there is an easement in place for future cross access.
Right, and our survey group will be handling that subdivision plat, and that will be included on there, that cross-access easement. With all the, standard required information that the survey guys show for that, so.
And again, it's noted as one of the conditions if the commission were to take action that note
Sure.
that we place there.
Yeah, I guess the only, my main, or the only takeaway here is that we do fully intend to provide that. So the easiest way forward, like you're talking about now, we're more than happy to go that route. That I don't see any issue at all with that.
Okay, good. Let's go back to Amanda. Amanda, you can continue walking us through it. Good. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm here on the civil concept site plan. So this is one of the sheets that we incorporated material information. So you see the images here of the segmented block landscape retaining walls. So those are the walls that we have around the edges of the site that had been previously noted by civil, but we were requested to provide a little bit more information. So that's the wall that wraps along the back of the site, the west side of the site, and then along the north side, and then up here in the front along Dealman. So the intent is to use this type of block, which is called a straight split. And it's arranged similarly to what we see in this photo here. And we are likely looking at this gray tone as our color selection. I'll note some of the things here since I'm on this sheet that Tyler mentioned. So one of the main changes was moving the trash enclosures. So previously those were cut into the wall along the west side, but those have been shifted, as Tyler noted, to these inside locations at the end of the drives to the garages of the units. There is one that remains. This serves the south cluster of 5 townhomes at this southwest location. And then, as he noted previously, because we could move those, we adjusted the overall buffer area. So we've got the 10 feet per the requirement. And as we flip through the landscape plans, those will show the landscape arrangement there. And then similarly along the 5-foot buffer along the north. So the grading plan really hasn't changed much. Minor changes as we were able to move the wall back. By shifting the trash enclosure, the height of that wall did change a bit since we didn't necessarily need to shield the trash, which we were doing before. So in some locations, that wall became a little bit shorter. As well, since we have the screening fence fully incorporated now, which is doing more of the screening along the west side of the property. And I believe the individual civil sections have been updated to reflect those minor grading changes and the changes along the west and north buffer. And then stormwater management plan. Ryan, I don't know if there's anything that you want to note here, or if you want to speak more to the MSD or county process, if whether Tyler captured that fully or not, or if you had any other updates.
Yeah, I'm happy to. The overall, similar to the grading, the overall drainage concept and how it will be handled remains the same with these, slight shifts in buffer areas and that nothing was impacted stormwater wise. As far as the MSD and St. Louis County approval, I don't know how closely you guys get feedback from working with the county specifically, but right now it's very challenging to get anything out of them, especially in a timely manner. So I don't think it's fair to say that, we've had since January 7th to get this resolved and we haven't. That's not due to a lack of effort or trying. It's due to, they're extremely backed up. They're short staffed. They've got the head of the review department has recently retired. So there's a lot of turmoil there. So we are actively trying, and then as soon as we get feedback from them, we will provide that. I will say that I'm aware of the St. Louis County standards, and that these curb cuts and entrances will be done per their requirements and are preliminarily shown per their requirements. So it'll be standard that we submit the full civil improvement plans once we have those available as well, and we'll go through the St. Louis County approval process to be fully approved. So just know that's coming, and as soon as we do get a preliminary review, we'll forward that along to Carlos, and he can disperse that to the commission. And I did hear the latest correspondence I got from the county. Actually, it was yesterday, where the lady that presumably is taking over the head role got back to me, and I requested to have a response by tonight. Unfortunately, we didn't get it, but it should be coming hopefully sooner rather than later. And along those lines, MSD will submit fully to them, but as I stated a couple meetings ago, we did submit this to MSD for conceptual approval. They've got a little more standardized process, and we got feedback from them. And the stormwater management and sanitary design reflects the preliminary conceptual review that MSD responded with. So I think from a civil standpoint, I think Tyler and Amanda have explained it pretty well. And if you have any questions, I'll remain on the line.
Anyone have
Thank
any
you.
questions for Ryan?
Chairman, the one question, and again, we understand the apron aspect of it too, but there is a county site triangle. And based on the county manual, it's noted what that criteria is. And what I'd like to know from Ryan is it designed to meet that specification? So
yes, Carlos, that we are designed to meet the site triangle, along with the county's got a landing and maximum slopes to their intersections. I say we're designed, I would say that, there's always, we're in the preliminary stage still, that we haven't finalized our design yet. Obviously, we plan on, profiling, so there might be minor tweaks, but the site was laid out with the St. Louis County requirements in mind, knowing that we're going to go through the full approval process and get their sign off as well per their standards.
and that's noting the topography of the road. It's not
That's
necessarily.
correct.
Okay, that's the issue that we had here at the city center because of Gilman Road and how it kind of gets down right in front. Even
Right, and I think, Carlos, you and I had spoken previously briefly, but so others know as well, we're in a little bit of an advantageous position than the city center, because we do sit up higher on the west side of Dealman versus coming up and out of the Olivet City Hall, which makes the sight lines and the sight distance a little bit easier to meet. And I will note that north retaining wall there, it does extend further east, but it's not impacting the sight lines. You'll see it's, we're a foot high or so. And whenever we calculate these sight distances, the eye is 3.5 feet above pavement. So we clear that without any visual impacts.
I had questions. They're not specific on MSD, so I wasn't sure if we need to let
Uh-huh.
Amanda. But
Well, Amanda's going through the drawings, so because these were civil drawings, that's why she wanted to have.
makes
Ryan
sense. I
go
can
on.
wait then.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
okay.
Let's Carlos, any other specifics or any other specific issues that you
No.
had concerns with? Okay, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. We'll bring it back to
Rob, I'm
Amanda.
sorry, Commissioner. can I
Yeah.
ask one?
Thank you, thank you.
So will you go back to the new location for the trash enclosures for a second?
I had a little trouble hearing that, but I think you were asking about the trash enclosure location.
Yes, I just wanted to see the picture. So how is this gonna work? So once a week, twice a week, a truck's gonna come in here straight in and then back all the way back up and then turn around in here? And that's not a double lane, that's a single lane, correct?
Correct. And Doug did have conversations with as Republic, correct? But yes, I think, I don't know that it's front in and back out. I think they are maybe backing in and then pulling out. Is that correct? But they will approach these individuals and so they're sized per what Republic requested. Gates to kind of block the visual, and those will be open when they're doing the service, pull the dumpsters out, and then pull back out of these drives.
Republic indicate that that was acceptable as a design. So they gave the thumbs up on that.
Yeah, they've reviewed this preliminary layout.
I take that wall and everything is high enough that it's not going to be seen from the Dealman roadside at all.
That transitions between the front yard and the lower level down below.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's about 6 feet of drop typically from the yard up on Dealman down to the garage area below.
Good. We'll go back to Amanda then.
I'll continue on. I believe the landscape drawings are next. Yes. And these are composed kind of in individual, there's 3 different sections across the property. So this is starting from the south end, and so we're rotated. So note that north is now up. But this is now coordinated with the same changes that we've made across civil and architectural. So for instance, you can see that southern trash enclosure here. So the buffer that we've all been discussing, so line of trees, that line that behind the retaining wall, and then the privacy fence that sits along the back property line. You can see the different arrangements of plantings. Here's that one of those trash enclosures. So it's landscaped around also from the top side, from the front yards. As I move to the center, one of the issues we had last time was that the landscape was not updated per the streetscape design. So that has been incorporated, where the central site access does have that plaza arrangement. We'll see that again on the architectural sheets as well, but the landscape has been coordinated with that design. And then the last sheet here for the northern 2 buildings. Again, the 5-foot buffer along the north that has the landscape screening incorporated into it as well. And then here's our lighting sheet. So this also has been updated for the latest site layout with the trash moved and the buffer. So we did snip on the different light fixtures that we have. So this is missing the pole. So forgive me, there wasn't an image that had the pole that goes with this, but the fixture that Tyler was speaking of. So these are typically 16 feet tall. All of the light is shining down. These are our wall sconces that we have on the houses themselves at either the entry doors from the upper level or over the man door that goes to the garage. These are small 2-foot tall bollards that are lighting the pathways when we're in those central plazas. You see these little C at 2 feet. So they're typically either side of the sidewalk approaching the individual units. And then type D is just a little step light. Give me as I zoom out here. And those are incorporated into the sidewalls of those stairs that lead from Dealman up to the units. And so with the photometric plan, as I was noting before, they plug in the individual characteristics of the lights that we've chosen, the specific specifications, the placement to then give the amount of foot candles that are shining on the surfaces surrounding that. So you can see, obviously, there's more, the most light is along the drive where it's supposed to be, illuminating the path there. You can see some of the other different calculations as you're kind of in the middle of the drives to the garages, a little darker, lighter as you approach the buildings, obviously where there's those wall sconces at individual doors. But typically we're talking about, maybe at max a 4-foot candle. So typically it's meeting code, meeting the city's ordinances in terms of light spill, and that type of information. Are there any additional questions on the lighting before I continue?
So just to point out, Amanda, 4-foot candles, you said is the maximum.
I believe so. I was kind of doing a quick breeze around. That's what jumped out to me. I'll just kind of keep swinging around. But I believe that is the case.
Does everybody know
I
what
believe
4-foot
3.9
candles
is
in terms of an amount of light?
If you got an example, go ahead.
I wish I knew the foot candles in this room. I'm pretty sure that office standards are about 50.
That's what I was going to say,
That's
Tyler.
For writing. So comparatively, like at that table or where they're writing, it's about 50-foot candles. We're talking about 4. So that's like a dimly lit restaurant.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the next sheet.
Okay. So now we're into the architectural. So I think we've hit on the major highlights for the site changes. So just kind of breeze around that here real quick. The Dealman Street elevation really hasn't changed. We've been showing the same arrangement of houses. We have done some clarifications on the materials. When I get to the last sheet that has the larger elevations, I'll show how that's been adjusted to be clear about the materials. This was about that street plaza. So just again, to kind of show you what's going on there. We have those little bench height walls that then lead you in, more plantings in this area to kind of enhance that central entry from Dealman. And there's the plan over to the side. So those two work in concert. And then the next sheet has our series of sections and detail sections to explain how the site overall works. So we had these 3, and these are all from Tyler's presentation from 2 weeks ago. They've just been updated with some of the changes that we've made, mainly along that landscape buffer again. So previously, some of these sections had that trash enclosure worked into them, but it's pretty straightforward now, where we always have a clear 10-foot from the back of curb to the property line. The 6-foot tall screen wall is placed just to the side of that property line with our landscaping and that space in between. This happens to be cut at a spot where that retaining wall is pretty low. So here you see it's about 2 foot above the elevation of the road in this case. This happens to be cut one of the plaza sections. Here, this is a little bit further north from the one above, where we're cut through one of the garage sections. You can see again, still that wall is relatively low, 2 feet or so above the drive. But grade is changing always as we look to our neighbors to the west. But we've got the 6-foot tall screen wall, landscaping in between. And then this is the farthest north elevation. So this is where Tyler talked about the grade changes significantly on the neighborhood to the west. So in this case, the retaining wall on the Dealman side is still pretty low, but because the grade drops off from that side, they're actually looking at more of the retaining wall than they are of the screening wall. And these series of sections continue to show that. This happens to be in one of the areas where the grade difference between our retaining wall and the drive is probably the lowest, one of the lower points on our site where we're cutting down into the garages. So I think this is likely our tallest retaining wall that we have on our side. But even given that, we've got the retaining wall, we've got the landscape again, and then we still have that 6-foot tall screen wall. Just also point out, so we incorporated those parking spaces. And I apologize, maybe I should jump back to the site plan real quick. We previously just showed them little indentations for the mail. They're, I think, about pulled 3 to 5 feet off of the road, but we have cut those in the full 8 feet so that we have those incorporated at these 3 areas. And so that's reflected also in the sections here. So this happens to be one where we've got a little bit more grade change into the plaza, but you can see where that car would be able to pull in off of the 20-foot drive.
Do you mind scrolling to the right on this one? It was the second light. No, to the right. I think it was, or yeah, the courtyard section maybe.
This one?
Yeah, and then I was just looking at maybe it was the one below that. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
I was looking at, this is one of the rare ones where the light was above the trees, if I'm correct. Unless I'm reading that wrong.
Probably go.
Yes.
Northeast.
And perhaps all of the lights, these pole lights are 16 feet tall. So wherever they happen to sit relative to grade.
But, I mean, I guess if you had a 2-foot retaining 10-foot tree, then that would probably justify that.
Yeah, as I said, I'm not sure what scale, what size tree. Obviously, if this is 16, the tree's drawn a little bit shorter than that.
It seemed like the exception unless somebody saw something else. But
The only thing I had a question on is the height of the poles. Is that in relation to the street or is that in relation to the wall? Is it built into the foundation wall? Because as your street goes up and down.
Those will always sit relative to the street. We have them the way let me get to one of the larger sections.
That one, you know, the number 6.
Sorry, which one?
Why
So what you're seeing here, so my heavy line here is cut through the grade of that instance. The light is beyond.
on the slope? Gotcha.
So you're seeing the drive is sloping. So this explains it though, where we've got the wall is always set a little bit back from the curb so that the light poles are able to sit down at the street level and not on top of that wall. So this is just a larger view of that northernmost where we've got that drop in the grade. And then here's along the north, our one through the north where the cross access easement is. This is another spot where there is a bit of fall as we move to the property to the north.
Amanda, hold
So,
on. I got a question for Carlos.
Yeah.
Carlos, is there any way that we could just put the light poles in the areas only where the driveway is kind of at its lowest setting? I know it's not going to be the same number of light poles, but it might reduce, you know, the amount of impact, and then also wouldn't be necessarily directly reflecting on the building.
Had to take a look at that and then kind of,
You see what I'm talking about now?
it'd be reducing the amount, but I may have some dark spots in there along there that I'd like to just kind of confer with the police department on safety.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that there's anything that is a condition upon code what that separation has to be or that the lighting has to meet a certain standard. I know we do have it for a parking field. This is not a parking field.
Right.
And I know they will have bollards in place, but it's something I would prefer to discuss with them if the current amount is reduced, because that's when we looked at it, this was about, you know, the spacing was about what is shown here.
Right. But that's varying. It now varies up and down on the slopes of the roadway. So I just, as a thought.
No, understand.
It would create dark spots in those spaces where you take them out. So the lighting would be pretty uneven, which is kind of a safety factor.
Yeah, we actually, for instance, we had one less originally on the north and the south. And as our lighting consultant was running the photometrics, they recommended we add one on each of those so that we didn't have dark spots, so we had an even distribution to the greatest extent that we could.
Sorry to interrupt.
You're good. Good questions. I think I cover, oh, and so here's the cut sheet. I know this has been submitted on projects before because I was looking at some of the prior submissions online. So this is that stone looking plastic fencing that we'll have along the west buffer.
And I will note, the screen wall was being installed at the Firestone facility. So if you get an opportunity to take a look at it, and that is the polymer, I hate to use the word plastic, version. The
Better
one
word.
mobile is solid masonry. And it is a stone wall. So that is different. But I think we found, that again, the intent of that wall is to help mitigate on sound. Highway, we know the Illinois Highway Department uses that, and that the polymer has a better absorption than the stone. So if you get a chance, take a look at it. I think it's coming out nice, and I think the advancements they made and the texture, especially like they showed here, is pretty impressive.
So we have the floor plans, which have remained unchanged, been providing those since the very beginning. I'll skip past those. And then the last sheet is our rendered elevations. So we just clarified from the comments we received last time, we had some what appeared to be blank areas. So for instance, below this bay window just showed as white before, but we do intend to take the brick down to grade almost everywhere. The exception is when we have our concrete steps up to our porches. Those would be stained. Essentially, it looks like paint. The entire building, as per the rendering, is white stained brick, so that anything that's concrete will be stained to match that. And typically, that is just the concrete steps or those retaining walls around the trash enclosures, which are mostly down at the garage level. The other side, previously, that was a little unclear. This area kind of below the porches was showing as all white. We are intending to take the same board and batten siding all the way down to grade at that side. So it likewise is not just exposed foundation. Here's one of the sections where you can see how that trash enclosure does sit. It's quite a bit down from, this is the Dealman side up here. We'll typically always also have a guardrail fence. So mostly what everyone sees will be the guardrail fence and not the trash enclosure.
Amanda, has there been any assessment of the smell of that garbage? It looks like it's right where, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like it's right where the walkway is to walk into the development on each.
No, actually, so it sits in between. Let me jump back to
okay, so
the site plan. Yeah, it works out quite nicely where it's always the opposite. So you enter into the plaza, go to either house, but it's at the backside. It's typically not a pedestrian area and has a lot of landscaping. We looked at the landscape around that bump.
Yeah, one more question. The guardrail around the trash enclosure above the retaining wall, do we have an elevation for that, or do we know what that is going to look like?
I think there's that right there.
Okay.
Yeah, so pretty simple. It's meant to be a bit more decorative. Probably a simple metal railing. It'll likely match what's on the porches for the units themselves. So there's consistency of design.
Okay, so that didn't change when the
No.
trash enclosure got moved over there.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, it used to just be a straight run in between, but so it'll have a jog in it, but same intent, same design.
Yeah, go ahead.
Carlos, did I hear at the beginning when you were presenting the things they looked at, one of them was parking and on street, or did I misread?
No,
that?
they had addressed it and provided those additional.
Okay. like actual on street, or we're talking about the parallel? Because we had talked potentially about parallel pull in at the back.
They're parallel pull ins kind of right by where it says mail.
Okay, I
So
didn't
the
think,
two
okay,
spots.
there wasn't anything that we've added to the front. I misread that, so,
no.
okay.
Amanda, can you show, I believe it's on the last PDF, the lower left-hand corner, and talk about the finish. That is the finish that faces the back of the residential properties, and I believe it is a brick. as
Yes.
opposed to, you know,
Yeah, so yeah, we were talking about rendering, no rendering, but just, yeah, to point out that this is what the west side of each individual unit will look like. It's all fully brick and a few windows.
So this is maybe a good moment to bring up one other question that I had. And it was something I alluded to earlier with the other renderings. I think the developer's done a nice job of adding dimension to the front of all of these. And I think you can see that in the face of the plans. You know, you see a lot of dimension, a lot of texture, looks really nice. The question mark I have, and I say question mark because I don't know the answer, whether it's okay or not, is when you look at the remainder of the plans, there are a lot of flat surfaces. For example, architectural sheet 1, A1. Maybe a better is a 101. I'm using the deprecated plans, but yeah, so the first and second floors, if you look down the rows, they're just a flat wall. There's seemingly no dimensionality. And this is something I alluded to earlier.
On which?
A101, you there? These lines.
But that's the back where the parking is. It's not the
That is
front.
the rear of the building.
Are you speaking to this side of the building?
I'm talking about, so yeah, maybe help me orient, but if you move your cursor to the far left and then run down to the bottom of the page, which side of the development is that?
So those are the backs of the buildings and they face each other,
Mm-hmm.
and which it creates that drive aisle where you access your garages. And they're flat like that because we have decks coming off of them.
On the other side, right?
No, on that side.
On that side. okay.
Yeah, over the driveways.
So if
And-
I'm looking at this, the rendering of the front, this right here,
Yes,
if this extends back, is this all flat like that?
yes, that's that side you're looking at.
And so someone walking down the main road here is going to see that massive flat surface
You're gonna see all these decks coming off of that.
with a
flat
bunch of flat
surface.
surface.
Yes,
If we ignore the
Yeah.
deck, it's a bunch of flat, first floor flat, second floor. flat.
sure. There are many beautiful buildings that have flat facades on them, though. I mean, I wouldn't say that you have to have ins and outs in order to make a good looking facade.
Well, my concern is, I don't know what it looks like because I would like to see a render from farther away that shows what that's going to look like. And it may be that you're right, but it's hard to take these two-dimensional site plans and convert them into what it's going to really look like sitting down the street. So I think if we could get some renders from, for example, sitting here, looking straight across what it's going to look like, looking down those rows, and maybe across the street at this front corner, looking, so we can see the perspective of what that looks like. It may be fine. I agree with you. There are plenty of applications that look great. And I know there's a lot of articulation on the roof line, but I think it would be really helpful. It'd make me more comfortable if I could see some of that in a full 3D rendering instead of trying to extrapolate it from the 2D. Does that make sense?
It does,
Is that something you guys can provide?
certainly. We can make renderings, lots of renderings. I think part of, well,
Okay, let's, Amanda, do you have anything else?
No, this was the last sheet. Just to point out, we did add a couple of our materials. So just to show stained brick, white, the metal panels that are on the facade in between our windows. Looks something like this, and board and batten white siding. Those are somewhat self-explanatory, but went ahead and provided those images to assist.
Good. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
At this point in time, is there any other specific questions for commission members? To the petitioner? If not, then I'd like to kind of entertain some public comments.
Chairman, before bringing in the public comments, that we can hear from the petitioner regarding their meeting with the association.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think they did briefly touch base, but
Okay.
maybe if you,
I just,
Doug? Doug? Would you mind just giving a quick overview of your meeting with the neighbors? Okay, well, was there any issues that the residents brought up to you?
So as I stated before, the screen wall and the landscaping and buffer in the back were the main areas of concern. They were wanting to know a lot about that wall and who would see what. They're honest. I'll tell you honestly what they said. They don't, well, I don't want to speak for all of them, but some of them don't like the wall, the screen wall. They have fences. The comment was made, many of the yards have fences already.
Right.
And so we said, well, we're going to provide that screen wall and your fence will still be there and it'll just be sandwiched up against it, I guess. Some of them wanted to see a wood fence instead. So we just kind of walked through exactly what was going to be provided and what's required by the city. There were comments about the lighting. And we talked about the light poles, the height. We talked about the fact that the light is oriented towards our buildings and that we have the landscape buffer and the 6-foot screen wall so that the light, can't come backwards onto there. It's shaded, basically. They were satisfied with that. In the end, I think we answered most of their questions. There were some questions about timing. They really wanted to know how long all of this would take place and when the screen wall would be built in regards to the timing of the project, because they wanted to make sure that that was one of the first things put in.
But I will say. in fact,
Right,
I
that
just got a
I was
text
just
from
getting
my
ready to say that.
fence guy. That wall is a challenge, yeah, so I told the group, I said, as soon as I get it, I'll install it. I'm
Right.
not looking to delay, but in the world that we live in, we cannot.
There may be
Where's it
some,
made?
What's that?
Where is it made?
Next door. But it doesn't matter. I mean, appliances take a year and a half.
Right.
It's across the board inconsistent.
Anything else?
there was concern about headlights coming in on that north access road, because that's ironically that where that road comes in is where the house sits the lowest in the
Right.
neighborhood is. So we explained how our retaining wall there, how it, I said it flips, and it's actually facing them, but we have extended it above the driveway high enough to act as a guardrail essentially on our side, which blocks the lights as well.
Right.
So that was the solution for that, so to make sure that we don't have headlights going in there. There were a lot of questions in regards to any future development, like because of that access road, that they were nervous because they say you're building this access road that points right at our neighborhood and our houses.
Right.
So we want to know, what's going to happen. How are we going to be concerned about it being run out? And there's a lot of talk about eminent domain and stuff like that. And we tried to assure them that we don't think that's the plan of the city. And certainly it would be another developer who would have to buy up all their land in order to build more. So that would be the scenario.
You guys, to the Castle Gate folks too, or just the Indian Trails folks?
Well, she made I don't know if she's on board here tonight, but she was at the last meeting, gave the full approval. Dean, I think it is.
There was a, sorry, Just really quickly, there were some other comments about folks not getting notice of this. Carlos, are you able to speak on that?
Yeah, the initial notices we sent in December, there was some several properties and even to the extent to say the street didn't receive the city's postcard. So we did send a second set after we were informed at that January 6th meeting.
So that's all been resolved.
Correct. And again, those aren't required by
I
code.
understand. I
Yeah.
understand.
They'll get another set is required to be sent out prior to the public hearing. So
Mm-hmm.
they will,
Okay, great. Okay, any public comments related to this agenda item? Anybody here on in the meeting room? Yeah. Okay, good. If you're going to make a comment, you do have to come up. You have to state your name and address for the record. Otherwise, we appreciate it. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Carlos, will you please check?
yes, we have several.
Good.
An answer to one of their questions.
Whose question?
I have in my possession an email that came on February 16th, and they indicated they had some additional questions. And the only thing I didn't hear the answer to, not that I'm attempting to be as open as you guys are with regards to the information that we heard. Will there be, and I can assume the answer, but I don't want to assume the answer, okay? Will there be a temporary fence barrier built between our properties during construction? Now, I heard the answer about the fence and the materials for the sound barrier fence, but I believe this is possibly a different question. Sure, please go to the mic.
Real quickly, that's required by code. It's not.
And I do remember Doug mentioning that early on. So.
Okay, Chairman, I got a couple of hands here. I am going to transfer Muhammad Islam over. I'm going to promote you to a panelist, Mr. Islam. And then if you can turn on your mic and video, it would be greatly appreciated. And then state your name and address to the commission. You should be transferring over. He's coming over.
Very good. As a reminder, make sure he unmutes himself too.
Okay, I'm unmuted now.
We can hear you, sir.
You can't see me, right?
Oh, not yet.
Okay.
On the lower left-hand corner, you should have access to whether your video clip works or not.
Yeah, okay, I got it.
If you can just state your name and address.
It's Muhammad Islam, 1136 Indian Trails, 63132.
Right, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so we had a good meeting with Doug, so we do thank him for taking the time and talking to us. One thing that surprised me about was this issue of the access road. It seems that this is something that the city wants, right? And the access road is into Indian Trails, which is a private street. So could you or somebody from the city as a representative of the city talk about that access road and sort of what the role of the road is going to be if it is built on our north side?
And I can address that, Mr. Islam. My name is Carlos Trejo. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development. Part of our 2006 comprehensive plan recognized that Olivet has several road deficiencies as you access Olive, that many of the subdivisions that were built off of Olive only have one means of in and out. in their Indian Trails, Magnet are two examples in the city center district. When we review plans in accordance to the city's 2006 comprehensive plan, there are 4 pillars of things that we take a look at. One is community development and identity, and that's how the buffer requirements have been set and put in place. The second is regarding, economic development and seeing reinvestment in our community. And this was an area of particular interest because we had seen a lot of disinvestment in some of these houses that were facing Olive Boulevard, Dealman Boulevard. The third thing is about open spaces, and you can see, the designers have done a great job in terms of curating both public and private spaces on Dealman and within the development itself. And then finally, it talks about transportation connections, and that's where the easement idea comes from. The city is requesting an easement. That means just in paper that if there was ever any redevelopment on Indian Trails or an opportunity to improve the cul-de-sac at Indian Trails and provide a secondary outlet to Dealman Road, we would have in place the ability to do that connection. Again, your road is private. The city has limited authority to dictate what happens on that private road in there. But in the future, or what we wouldn't want to do is relinquish the possibility in the future to improve access into Indian Trails by providing the secondary outlet to Dealman. If we don't do that now, and if their road becomes private, then we lose that opportunity for the community as a whole. So all we're asking is that on paper, they identify that if and when, or if a selection is ever made, that opportunity exists. Is that address your question? Or?
No, yeah. But so that's where sort of our concern about eminent domain came in, really, that could city exercise that and open that, road up.
And the city has a pretty comprehensive eminent domain policy that was adopted by reference to the 2006 comprehensive plan. And I'd be glad to forward you that link in there. But in summary, it is not a tool of preference of the city at all, and especially on residential properties. But again, I'll forward you that link, provide you that opportunity to take a look at that. And if you have any questions regarding that in there, I'd be glad to answer it or address it to the commission.
Hey, Carlos, do you mind if I chime in with something?
Absolutely.
In many respects, the fact that the city is asking for an easement is diametrically opposed to the notion of exercising eminent domain, because eminent domain is the forceful taking of your property. The fact that we're asking for an easement in this case, we wouldn't need an easement if the city was exercising eminent domain. The property would just become the city's. So I think I would urge you to maybe disconnect in your mind the notion of this easement being somehow affiliated with eminent domain. They're two different things, two different mechanisms, and if one doesn't beget the other, perhaps is exclusive of the other in this circumstance.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you for your question. Appreciate it.
Right, Mr. Islam, I'm going to put you back as an attendee.
Thank you.
Hey, Chairman, I do have another hand up, Mr. Kalina, Alan Kalina. I am going to transfer you over, promote you to a panelist. Once you transfer, we ask that you turn on your mic, of course, and your video, and state your name and address before addressing the commission.
Second. Alan M. Kalina, 1120 Indian Trails Drive, Olivet. How are you all doing?
Good.
I want to revisit some of the subject matters that were addressed here today for some further clarity, if I could, please. Talking about the lights, which we did discuss when we when Doug and his crew met with the We Neighbors. If I'm reading the diagram correctly, there's going to be over 100 lights on that property. The ones that are on 16-foot poles shining down, based on the fixtures that were just shown to us, they are not a mono-directed light that's aimed solely at the property to the east of us. They are round fixtures with a 360-degree illumination, unless I'm misreading the image of those fixtures. A.
Clarify that, sir,
No,
before we
that
move
is
on.
incorrect. Our code requires that they be, that
They're one-sided.
that it's a direct illumination to the ground. It can't have, you cannot see the emitting source. below.
Direct to the ground only on the east side of us, or is it 360 directly to the ground?
It's directed to the ground in there. So the emitting source of that light fixture is in a box panel and then reflected downward.
I understand that it's downward reflected. My question is whether it's a 360-degree downward lighting, or
Yeah.
whether it's one face only aimed at the east side of our properties.
Sir, it's an upside down snow cone. That's the best way I can describe it.
Right, which basically is throwing light coming out of that fixture 360 degrees, not 180.
Yeah, maybe the developer can address that.
So when it comes to light fixtures, you can't confuse the geometry of the fixture itself with how light comes out of it. And that's why we do photometric studies. Each specific light has a photometric pattern that comes
Okay.
out of it that has to do with the reflective lamps that are built into it and the various different things. So even though the light visually looks 360 degrees, so it's just a geometric design, you have to go by the photometric chart that's on the ground where we show the foot candles coming out. And these particular light fixtures, however, I'm not a lighting designer expert, so I don't know, but however they craft the inside of the light so that the light is mostly directed in one direction, that's how they control that light.
Okay, and the other, I'm sorry. The other thing I was going to question regarding the lights and some of the new imagery that we saw for the first time here today. The 16-foot light poles show, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the landscaping calls for most of the landscaping buffer are arborvitaes, not trees. And in showing some of those graphic images next to the 16-foot poles, you're showing 25-foot tall arborvitaes, if I'm reading your graphic correctly. 25-foot arborvitaes, I don't know that there is such a thing, but if it's going 25 feet tall, it's going wider than the 10-foot buffer area you've got to work with. So I'm not sure if I understood what had been said previously, that we're expecting the arborvitaes to block light from, contributing to blocking the light coming west into our backyards. If I'm understanding correctly, I don't think that makes sense for what it's worth. I've got lots of arborvitaes. I've been growing arborvitaes for a long time. I brought some pretty substantial ones that have been growing for 10 years and they're 10 feet tall. So I'm not sure that the discussion about the landscaping somehow contributing to blocking light flow into our backyards is accurate.
Got it, sir?
Well, I'll keep going then. It's interesting to discover that the buffer wall, and this was something that was referenced a few minutes ago, that it's polymer, not to be confused with plastic, because I was kind of assuming that it was the one that had been referenced to us at Mobile, which is a real deal, not a facsimile molded out of plastic. So I'm just wondering how resilient that is, or how likely that is to be something that could fairly easily, with a lot of sun and weather exposure, end up breaking, crumbling, whatever.
Okay. Sir, you're hit your 3 minutes, so if there's.
No, I'm sure I did.
So we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
There is if I can address
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
commission regarding the lighting, because I think I'm hearing two different things in there. I understand about the glare and the reflection component that Commissioner Brophy has brought forward. But the other aspect is that the intent of the buffer is not to eliminate lighting or any lighting spillover. It helps mitigate the lighting spillover and such. And we all know that within those designs, that those arborvitaes are they're probably, cookie cutter, landscape things that you use in the planting software. The city has adopted specific standards. The city has adopted specific heights. The city has adopted the screen wall, and the council, through that adoption, that has been determined that satisfies the criteria for mitigating light, noise, and sound in that. Now, in the past, when a petitioner has sought something above and beyond of what the code would permit, reduced setback, a taller height, or so. In lieu of that request to go above and beyond of what that code standard is, the commission has in turn received a taller screen wall or additional landscaping or a wider buffer. But in this case, the setback, the building height, the light standard, the light fixture, and the overall width of the buffer is all code compliant and well below what the code maximums would be in there. And that's something that the commission will assess and evaluate. I just want to make sure that the commission is aware on that. They have met the minimum standard that is permitted by code, by right, and they're not requesting any special criteria setbacks. They have probably the greatest setback that we've had regarding several multi-story properties that we've had before the commission in there. This is probably the most ample setback, and those cross sections effectively show that width of the setback, the distance of the buildings, and even how those grades kind of help in addition to, and those aren't code required, those are just the natural topography is helping reduce that height to increase that setback and provide a better buffer in there. We did provide, I think when we were doing the olive crossing, a variety of different cross sections for different buildings throughout the city, including easy storage, which has a 20-foot setback, but that's a 5-story building from residential properties. The Oliver, which is a 4-story building, I believe that is a 45-foot setback from residential properties with an 8-foot wall. And in this case, the maximum height here varies where you measure it, but in theory, they don't exceed 40 feet from the ground base of the garage. And the setback is, I believe, about 40 feet. The width of that drive, the 10-foot setback, and that those buildings are 40 feet from there. So I understand the concerns and all that. The other thing I'll note that the city does require the screen wall buffer. We don't dictate on how it's designed and where it's placed. It has to be within that buffer. The design decision of where that placement is not ours, that is the designers. And they made that decision to put it at the extreme end of the property line. And I think it works most effectively providing, and in this case, because of the heights and the grades, the biggest visual barrier between the properties that are lower on on the development and as to oppose the existing properties, especially along that south side. And again, the cross sections that were provided are excellent, kind of showing that detail of how a majority of this development on the southern end is kind of embedded into the ground, as opposed to the northern end where it starts to kind of match up with the ground.
Good clarification.
Quickly, Carlos, for what it's worth, just so you know, to the best of my knowledge, none of us have received a single postcard.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Right, Chairman, I don't show any additional hands. I think everybody left is set to a specific agenda item on here already.
Okay, any other further discussion on this item? Go ahead, Carol.
I just want to note that in terms of land use only, I'm just talking about land use first, there's no question in my mind that this is in keeping with our plan and keeping with our sure of this portion of all of that. And I personally, I'm very excited about the idea that we're continuing to fulfill the vision that that document has expressed for us. We're able to keep making use of it and keep finding more and more ways in which to further that vision. I'm personally very excited about the idea of the project. With regards to the rezoning itself, I like the idea of going to city center development for this. I think it's a nice fit. And I'm very comfortable with the idea of doing it.
I concur. I'm not sure how everybody else feels.
I agree. I mean, I know I've been outspoken this evening. My only existing hesitancy is about that. Those flat surfaces. I'd like to see some more renderings of those before we approve the overall plan for the structure. I agree with your sentiments entirely. This is a great use of this area and forwarding our goals. I want to make sure that we, as we look at a large development like this, there are a lot of details, and I want to make sure that something doesn't fall through the cracks. And on a typical house, we look at all four sides, we look at the massing on all four sides, we make sure that the neighbor's view is going to be a pleasant one. We've had discussions recently about the new development on Old Bonham and insisting that things look nice from all angles. I just personally don't feel like I have enough information about the massing on the sides, particularly the side nearest the corner. Yeah.
It does have different materials.
It has different materials.
It does
It
have
may be
different-
fine. I just think myself personally, I'd like to see some more renderings of that in toto to get comfortable with it. I'd hate to say, yeah, good enough, and then have it built and decide that it wasn't.
With all due respect in regards to that comment, I've always made it a policy, no matter what municipality I develop in, and I develop in all of them, is that I only hire the best. My team is well thought of from all facets of my team. And I'm not interested in, I've got $10,000 in renderings already. I'm not interested in spending any more money on renderings. I'm 100% confident my architect team is 100% confident that as you're driving down from Olive Street Road, down Dealman Road, been doing this for 35 years, that people are going to look at the backside of that and have a wow factor. I'm not looking to have anybody but my architect design these buildings. I'm 100% confident that these buildings from every angle are going to be outstanding.
So you're not willing to do another rendering, Doug, just to satisfy us that it looks okay? Does it no?
This is a $13 million project.
I don't see the benefit.
have anybody but my architect design.
The fence that looks across. What is the fence that looks across the property look like from right here? How does that look and how does that facade look?
Right here, literally.
Right here, from looking out across the street. How does that look? I don't think you can see that on any of these renderings. The front facade. Don't you guys have a fence that goes across the, yeah, right across the top?
I think it was in some of the rendering or the it's in your presentation that was. Yeah.
This was the only rendering I've seen. This is the only.
That's
3D
the only
perspective we have
rendering.
seen. So you spent 10 grand on this?
I mean,
That's not the only rendering.
The only 3D perspective. view.
I'm sorry.
This is the only 3D perspective. view. That's what I, by you saying the word rendering, that's what I'm talking about. The,
I mean, I've had it tweaked 5 different times.
Carlos, was there any in the presentation that was conducted before? Was there anything? I thought there was some more.
From looking at it from these, let's go pull up from this and the front door. It's dealing, you know that, right?
Yep.
Those are the marquee properties. Those are the. That the door break in the elevation. Facing east.
so Doug, maybe if I,
Isn't there,
Right.
isn't there a guardrail? Yeah, because that's a ball. Okay, you're right. So where is that? Where can we see that?
talking about the plan, not, all I'm asking for, to make sure we're just, right, just to make sure we're on the same page. Because I think what we're asking for is pretty reasonable, but maybe we have a difference of opinion. And for renderings, which shouldn't take long, it's already modeled, right? You just change the perspective and hit render. It's some computer cycles. I mean, I do this at home. It's not a big deal. Okay, someone can do it.
This way or this way?
You did an AutoCAD or something like that?
SketchUp for crying out loud. So how can you sit here today and tell us that this is going to look great when you haven't even rendered it to look at it yourself? How's that possible? Then show us. For the reason that renderings exist is to help us see it more like it's going to really be. I mean, this is a big development, Doug. And we're not asking for much. I'm not asking for much. That's not our problem, sir.
But why did we ask this? This is our, what is it, board meeting? Why are you waiting right now?
Have to move on this until what, May 20th?
Commission has 120 days. I know it's noted, May 20th, 2022.
Whatever schedule you've come up with is your business, but we have an obligation to make sure we're comfortable with what we're approving. We're asking for a few more renderings of a massive project. And you're telling us no, which frankly strikes me as wholly unreasonable.
Schedule of everything.
more delays are just more costly. I'm hearing what you're saying. I don't hear anybody else. If the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you other people are adamant about this, then I have no choice. But I'm only hearing one person saying this.
So I definitely would like to
2
see the
people are
plan.
saying
Yeah,
it.
three,
Three
we'll go
people.
three.
4 people. Fine, we'll do it.
All right, any other further questions or comments that we want to discuss right now?
In the interest of, good faith moving things forward, I think we can move on some of this tonight. Is that right, Carlos? For example, the rezoning and things of that nature?
And the rezoning essentially is tied to that preliminary development plan, which is what you're seeing right now.
I thought there were, maybe I'm mistaken, I thought there were 2 separate items. One was a recommendation to
To
the
the
city
council for the rezoning.
for the rezoning. We could do that tonight. Or is it too difficult to separate?
It's too difficult to separate. Because it is subject to the approval of that preliminary development plan. They have to go hand in hand. The council
I see.
can't do just the rezoning without commitment of what the development is going to be. Looking at the schedule. If the schedule is a concern, and I look for the direction on the commission. Our next meeting is March 17th. The commission can act tonight if they chose to do so with a condition that the renderings, things like the issue is about looking at these renderings and seeing if they're consistent with that elevation. Well, there's confidence enough because that could change some of the criteria. It does give staff enough time to prepare to bring this forward to the council on March 22nd. That would be even the earliest date that we could do it.
Would it be possible to get the renderings? This is a directed at you, Doug. Is it possible to get the renderings before the next meeting so we can review it and be, prepared to act that night as long as things look good?
Okay, I think we need to move on. I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate it, all the changes that have been made so far. And I do think it's a very nice development. I think it's moving definitely in the right spot. So, but I think right now, based on kind of the opinions that I've heard, I don't think we're going to make a decision on this or, conduct a motion at this time. Sorry about that, but I think we just need to kind of make sure everybody is comfortable with, the plans and the thought process that's going in. Okay, anybody disagree? Okay, otherwise we got to move on. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Okay, let's move on to new business. Item A has been deferred. So we will move on to item B, which is 1220 North Price Road. Petition type is a special permit use and site plan review for a cannabis cultivation and manufacturing facility. Petitioner is John Pennington with New Growth Horizon LLC. Property owner is New Growth Horizon LLC. Carlos?
Chairman, before you is a property address is 1220 North Price Road, which is kind of centered in the aerial shot right above you on your monitors and in the projector system. It's an old kind of warehouse manufacturing facility. Based on best I can tell, I believe it was constructed specifically for the distilling of Southern Comfort, and it was in operations there till I believe the mid-80s. Yep. Correct, and Southern Comfort used to have their headquarters in downtown St. Louis, and this was the primary manufacturing facility or distilling facility for that. It's a very nice building. It has over 100 and it has nearly 132,000 square feet But again, on a 5.9 or nearly 6-acre site. Again, it was built back in 1965. Since Southern Comfort left, I'm sure it's had various tenants. The most notable one was Buffalo Tools that used it for warehousing and also for some commercial retail of construction tool type of equipment in there. It has gone through various hands of ownership, even Raven Properties, which redeveloped Northwest Plaza, used to own this. But recently got purchased by Bamboo Equity, which is part of Intellica. And the city has a pretty good relationship with Bamboo Equity. We've worked with them on various projects here in all of that, including like Dillman Rock Island Industrial and some development activities they've done there, and then some other interests along the commercial boulevard. They reached out to the city once they acquired that property for discussion on what various users can be used on that site. They were kind of just holding on the property and working on managing and leasing. When they were approached though by Proper Cannabis, who has a facility in Rock Hill, they have a license for the cultivation and manufacturing of medical cannabis products, and they received second licenses to do so. And they expressed interest in this building along with others in the region. And Bamboo Equity quickly brought it to our attention, and then Proper Cannabis reached out to us regarding their interest and provided us a tour of their site in there. And in the discussions, both Bamboo Equity and Proper Cannabis knew that the property was zoned light industrial, and also that in the light industrial district, manufacturing and even cultivation are permitted uses by right. I mean, if somebody wanted to manufacture widgets, all they would do is approach the city for an occupancy permit. If somebody wanted to cultivate, indoor, tomatoes or so, all they had to do is approach the city for an occupancy permit in it. However, they brought to our attention that what they wanted to do was the cultivation and manufacturing of medical cannabis, and that they had been issued the licenses. But noted that they're very aware that during the cultivation process, there is a distinct odor that's emitted. And forthright that they wanted to work with the city, knowing that, that even though this would be permitted by right, that it would behoove both the city and for Proper Cannabis to have some type of procedure laid out on dealing with this odor emittance in there. We appreciated them reaching out, and we appreciated them being proactive about it, and we sat down and discussed it, and they drafted a odor mitigation plan, which is part of your packet in there, to try to address this issue. And what we looked at is that if they would be willing to go, rather than being a permitted use by right, voluntarily apply for a special permit. And also that within our authority, the city's authority, that we can require that this also be reviewed as a special permit. What a special permit does is it allows the city to adopt certain standards to mitigate issues or concerns of that a use may have. And in this case, again, the fundamental use that would be proposed in this building is permitted by right. But both parties being aware that there would be the potential for an odor issue during the cultivation process, that again, it would behoove to have a set of standards on how that would be mitigated. And when I say in the terms of mitigated, would be what improvements would be made to the building, process for collecting and directing calls if there are concerns or issues with that odor, and then a review process that both the city and the developer or the occupants would work with the city to do so. And again, you have copies of those within your packet. Got a couple of aerials of the site. It is a really unique building. It is, you know, like I said, almost 140,000 square feet, one of the largest buildings that I have here in the city of Olivet and the industrial parks. This northern section is actually a 2-level section because I believe that's where they would have, I don't know, they use barrels or what, but it's embedded into the basement. It's a two-level warehouse on this end. They will primarily occupy the southern end here and continue to use this as a warehouse facility, a standard warehouse facility. Again, here are the views of the building and of the site itself. But you can see, you know, the industrial park, and again, this being a permitted use by right, is right adjacent to single-family residential properties along there. And again, their concern was, you know, it would be beneficial for both the city and themselves to have a process to be able to address and manage any issues or concerns that may come about given the odor that would happen during the cultivation process. So what I provided you in your report, and I tried to get that out as early as possible. You know, again, I wanted to note that this is a permitted use by right. Cultivation and manufacturing are authorized in the light industrial district. They have agreed to go forward to adopt a odor mitigation plan through a special permit process, which then would have an ordinance to assist in the enforcement of that mitigation plan. And when you go through a special permit process, there is a procedure that you follow for that review that's reflected in the report. And first and foremost, as in any review that we do with items that come before the commission, is what does the 2006 comprehensive plan say? And is it consistent with the visions and goals of the comprehensive plan? And it is. And the comprehensive plan specifically talks about the industrial parks reutilization of a lot of these facilities to current demands and needs and employment opportunities. And more importantly, that we expand the node of the bio and life sciences that we have just to the west of us. And this is what this does in there. And then it also gives the authority for the city to be proactive in trying to mitigate not just things such as odor, but noise, pollution, and all these other measures that would be generally associated with something that would not be permitted by right. But in this case, this is, but they're being cognizant of the odor issue, they're willing to put together this mitigation plan. And that the basis of the mitigation plan, again, is, you know, the city participate in the facility design, that there are procedures for odor detection and management, and then there's a process for annual review. And the best way to formalize this process is through the special permit process. Zoning is my expertise, and I can, you know, I think I kind of given you that full umbrella, but I couldn't talk to you about the cultivation process as well. And we do have a representative from Proper Cannabis that can go into more detail. I did provide some links in your staff report that access information about what happened, the stages of the cultivation. It sounds like it's during that flowering issue that there's a propensity that there's this odor or aroma that arises from that. They can better explain. The goal for tonight was to educate the commission about that process. What is that odor? What would it relate to, and whether these mitigation tactics would be sufficient or reasonable to continue discussions on it. Be glad to answer any specific questions, especially the zoning ones, but I'm not necessarily the cannabis ones.
Carlos, and you may say that you can't answer this, but when we talk about it emits an odor, is there any way to give us any kind of a feel for how bad or how intense is this?
It's difficult.
Is it
I
going
would
to
give
be
them,
like-
when I visited the site, and this is my personal opinion, not a professional opinion. When I visited that site along with a couple of members of staff, I was not aware that there was an odor out there because there was a lumber company and I smelled wood in there. When I'm at the Public Works building and I walk out of the Public Works building, I smell grilled onions or I smell smoke coming from trigger fire. And again, and I don't find those offensive in there, nor did I find that. So it's hard to tell you what exactly this odor is and how that works. And that's where, again, I provided you links to kind of look into that information in there, but more specifically for the petitioner, the goal tonight was to get that focus, to get information from the petitioner of what that odor is, or what, where does that fall within the spectrum, or what's comparable. I mean, because you will probably hear from an individual personal different opinions of what they believe that smell or odor is. There may be some that like it, and then there may be some that don't like it, and they'll describe it in different ways. And that's why we want them to talk to the commission to be able to answer those questions. And then I will note, talking with representatives of Proper Cannabis, we felt it was important, and so did they, that they reach out to the neighboring subdivisions back up to this and to engage in a discussion. And I think you have a couple of representatives here. It'll be up to them and they'll speak. And again, I'm looking for their opinion, but I think that, we appreciate the petitioner's efforts about doing that reach out and that education too on that. So that's all I have, if that answers.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Doesn't the Department of Marijuana or Department of Health that covers that, don't they have stipulations for air quality and mitigation in their rules?
That's a good question. I don't recall seeing any in Amendment 2, but I'm not an expert on that. In there, if there is defines. Now, it's also an interesting question, because when we looked at it, the city has a nuisance code, and odors can fall under that nuisance code. But the burden of proof is always put on the city to declare that it is a nuisance. And it's also very subjective. Again, what somebody smells, somebody else may think it's completely different. That being said, we talked about, well, they could get occupancy, and if this becomes an issue, we would use the nuisance code, but there really would, it's pretty vague, and I think you would find the same thing in the state statutes, unless there are some specific numerical requirements. They just use words like a foul odor. Well, that's kind of hard to define, and the burden again is put on the city to define what is foul and provide that proof to a judge. Or so that's where we think, we're hoping that the mitigation plan, and again, looking for the commission input in this, would put us in a better position to be able to follow up and enforce, whatever standards are in place.
And I can also add to that, most of the county air pollution control, those are all kind of more health-based, issues. The issues with the cannabis, the levels may be below any health standards, but it could still be considered a nuisance odor. And it's my understanding too that the odors can change. It's not a consistent odor that happens or occurs during the process. So it changes depending on what they're doing, which adds to kind of some of the potential nuisances when sometimes you have odors, sometimes you don't. Things like that where it comes and goes.
My concern, and I, have generally no concerns overall, but is that even if with great mitigation, great approach, odor detection management, involvement in the city, if it's there and the neighbors hate the smell afterwards, what course of action will we even have at that point? Is there any options at that point? Because the business doesn't want that, the neighbors don't want that, but it's there then.
That's my concern also. This is a great plan. It's very
Yeah,
thoughtfully
yeah.
developed. But there's no and then this will happen.
Yeah, it's kind of like not to bring it back, but the landscaping, we have no control.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of documentation in the plan, but not a way to ultimately nip it in the bud.
There's no
if you
teeth.
will.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
I see.
Based on my understanding too, there's not really an existing system that covers everything.
It's new.
It's new.
Yeah.
And it's constantly evolving right now because people are trying new
And,
processes.
and I am all for it, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness too. It's just I'm really curious if we need to bring legal into it as well, because what if the city's brought to, what if a lawsuit's brought, or what if I don't
Right,
know.
mean, there are issues about the devaluation of property, like takings and things of that nature.
Yeah. That's my concern, but you know, I love the idea. I love the plan. I agree it's thoughtful.
And the predominant winds, you know,
Yeah.
generally. you
Now
know,
we're gonna have no longer water. We're gonna talk winds in our
Yeah.
next mapping.
Yeah,
Is
but
it-
they move right into that residential area, which is
Sure, I think I'd love to hear from the
petitioner.
petitioner to
Yeah.
get some idea of what we're talking about before we speculate on what ifs.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like, if we're talking about something as intense as, like when you go near Anheuser-Busch and you can smell the beer from miles away. Is that really what we're talking about? Or are we talking about something that's, you know, or much closer in nature?
Do we have a
I have some
representative?
idea.
Yes.
Okay,
All right.
good.
Matt LeBear, I'm going to transfer you over to a panelist and I'll introduce you once you're set. If you can make sure that your mic and video is on. Mr. LeBear is the Chief Operating Officer for Proper Cannabis. He's one of the co-owners on here, and we appreciate your patience, Matt, on this.
No worries, guys, and thank you all for hearing us out today. And Carlos, I think most of that was really well said and summarizes exactly where we are in the process. And I think first and foremost, I'm trying to get my camera on for you, but oh, here we go. First and foremost, I think oh geez, that's not what I wanted as my background, guys. I think somebody's messing with me on my background here.
Go with it.
I guess it's appropriate. So, look, first and foremost, I think what's important to us as a company is that we want to be good neighbors. And so that's why we reached out proactively and wanted to have a conversation with the city and to, make sure that we're doing everything in our power to be good neighbors and to be, stewards of the community. We believe we've done that in Rock Hill. We also have retail dispensaries in South County and Warrenton. We've, taken the same steps at those locations too, and in those municipalities as well. So I can certainly speak to some of the questions that you all have brought up in terms of how bad or how intense the smell may get. I think somebody mentioned that air quality is probably less of a concern. That's not really something that we're too concerned with. What we do does not really impact air quality to the level that it would be any sort of health risk or health concern. But the odor is something that does exist. And in terms of how bad it is, it does vary based off of the time of day, the time in the plant's life cycle. And so there are certain times in the week and certain times of the day where the odor is more intense, and times where it's not at all. You could walk up to our building in Rock Hill on most days and not smell anything. But if it's a day that we're harvesting plants and kind of jostling plants around and moving them around, it does tend to smell, around the perimeter of the building in certain spots, typically by doorways, but generally not unless you were right on top of the building. Are there any other questions that I miss? You mentioned the brewery. This isn't something that we would anticipate, somebody driving down the street and smelling. It's something that, we tried to keep contained within the building. With that said, complete mitigation or complete elimination is probably not realistic and probably not likely. So we wouldn't sit here and say that, we'll be able to 100% eliminate all odors. It's not realistic as of now with current technology. But we are committed to doing everything that we can to make sure that we can mitigate it to the best of our degree.
Quick questions. I guess one is that it sounds like the smell is most prominent at, like you said, when you're moving or at certain times, and what I've read. How often is that? Is that once a day, 5 times a day, once a week? Those kind of things. And then how long is that period of time? And then, sorry, my second question, you mentioned it's strongest near like the doorways, right near the building. but does it extend, does it dissipate really quickly in the air, or could it extend a block down?
Yeah, so first, how frequently, so the way that we operate our facility is we've got actually 8, relatively speaking, smaller flower rooms. And so we harvest every 8 weeks. What that basically means is that we're harvesting one of those rooms 1 time a week. So every week we're having a harvest. We typically do that on Mondays, and we finish the harvest in that one day. So whatever day that is, if we were harvesting on Mondays, typically you would see an uptick or a spike in odor, and that's about once a week. In terms of your question, how quickly does it dissipate? Some of that is determined by, I think somebody mentioned, wind and kind of atmospheric conditions. So, relative humidity, and sometimes that seems to dissipate, and that those smells fall down really quickly. On certain days, it does seem like they travel a little bit further. But we've looked into not just odor mitigation inside the building, but odor mitigation outside the building. And there seems to be some promising technologies to really make sure that odor is not traveling, any distance at all once it, if and when it does get outside of the building.
In the packet, you show some different mitigation systems. Which one are you planning to use?
In all likelihood, we're probably going to take a multi-prong approach. It's what we've done at our facility in Rock Hill. So we've got some passive mitigation, but also some kind of active air scrubbing through charcoal filters. And then the technology that I just mentioned is one in which there's, I would describe it as kind of a mist that goes on top and outside of the perimeter of the building that sort of knocks down these odors.
Is that add like a pleasant odor to the exhaust system, kind of like you see in a restroom or things like that?
Yeah, it would be less intense than what you would see in a restroom. I mean, our goal is to neutralize the odors without adding any sort of artificial smell or I mean, again, smell is so subjective, right? So, we could spray something outside of the building that somebody could think smells a lot worse than the cannabis itself. Most of us don't mind the cannabis smell, but if I got sprayed with, a potpourri that was in a bathroom, I wouldn't like it. So it's really subjective. So our goal is never to overpower the smell. It's really to try to neutralize it to the best of our ability.
Two questions, if I may. So the first question I have is there an opportunity for us to visit one of those facilities in Rock Hill, for example, at a time when you can represent that the smell is strongest, so we can just experience that and get a sense for it? I think, I don't know about everyone else, but I just have no idea what we're talking about. And I'd be willing to take that trip. I mean, you're clearly, we take to heart the fact that you want to invest and be a good neighbor. I'm willing to make that trip if that's something that you might consider. That's number one. Number two, and maybe Carlos could comment on this too, but my understanding is that the location here only has residential on one side or predominantly on one side. Is that right, Carlos?
That is correct.
So the second question is, could we time the production of the odors to align with when prevailing winds are headed in the right direction so that we don't offend the residential folks or limit the amount of smell going in that direction?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We're certainly flexible in our processes, and we would certainly be willing to explore that. And if it was something that was viable and made sense, we would absolutely be willing to look into that and adapt our processes and our timing to do that. But I would have to, honestly, talk to one of our consultants that's a little bit more well-versed in that stuff So I apologize. I can't give you a 100% confident answer there, but I can tell you that with 100% confidence, I can tell you that we would certainly be open to exploring that. And then to the original question, a tour during sort of peak odor hours or days. Yeah, we would be happy to have you guys out. We would love to have you out to the facility and take a look at what we do and you know, kind of see and smell or not smell for yourself. And yeah, so we would absolutely be able to arrange a tour.
Is that something, I'm sorry. pardon me.
No, I'm just curious, since the city has gone out there, you know, or members of the city have gone out there, was that at a time when the odor would be significant?
I don't, if you gave me Carlos, is there any chance that you know the date of that tour? Off the top of my head, I don't know. But if I had the date, I could probably go through and tell you if it was one of those times.
And while Carlos is looking at that, do the odors occur in the rooms that say flower? Or-
Yes. Typically, that's where the odor is the strongest, and really, it's kind of in the later stages of life. So as I mentioned, once we call it flipping to flower. So you're changing the photo period of the plants from 18 hours of light and 6 hours of darkness to 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness. And when you do that, the plants, instead of growing, you know, vegetatively or just growing up, that's when they start to develop buds. And if any of this is, if you need me to explain, please let me know. But it's once those buds start to develop that we start to see some smells, and those smells are caused by terpenes that are in the plant. And those are typically strongest in the last, 3 to 4 weeks of a plant's life cycle. So that's when we really, see an increase in smell in those rooms and in the building. Given that we always have plants in every different life cycle, some rooms are stronger in smell at specific times than others.
Is there a cleaning device in each room?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we've got charcoal filters and air scrubbers in every one of the rooms.
So the neighborhood that is on one side of this facility, what is the likelihood that the houses in that neighborhood are gonna experience any kind of smell? If most of this you might smell if, just right outside your building.
Yeah, the distance of those houses is close. We would, there are times where there will be, what we would consider a faintly detectable smell that is possible to get to those, reach as far as those houses. It's not something that we would do everything we could to make sure that that wasn't the case, but I can't sit here and tell you that there's never going to be a time when they smell it, based off of wind and weather conditions and somebody's sensitivity to smell. It's difficult for me to sit and say that they would never smell anything.
Chairman, real quick, it looks like, and I'm not sure if you can determine it right here and then it's what you meant, but we were there December 10th at 10 a.m. in the morning, and they were harvesting that day.
Oh, yeah. So that was it. That was about as strong of a smell as you're going to get from our facility. If it's a harvest day, that was in December when we were doing some Friday harvest, it looks like. If you experienced it on a harvest day, that is the peak of it. And we would be happy to do that again on a harvest day, have you folks out and see and smell for yourself.
The facility that you guys went and looked at, is there residential property adjacent to it?
Not in as close proximity in there, but I wasn't familiar with the area. I know there are residential properties surrounding the industrial park that it was located in, but I didn't see like if it was the back area of that site.
Right.
I couldn't tell you for sure. I could pull up an aerial.
Yeah, that might be kind of good. And then I was curious, have you had any complaints in the Rock Hill area related to your facility?
We have, yeah, we have had a few complaints, and we've worked with the city of Rock Hill to address those. You know, one of the things that we did is we reached out to a local company called Tri-Wrench and began conducting internal and external tests around the building, measuring VOCs or volatile organic compounds by parts per million. So anytime that we got a complaint, we would run those tests, like I said, both inside and outside of the building, down to the parts per million. We have not, on the occasion that we've gotten complaints, we have not been able to detect smell outside of the building, although we are looking into more advanced technology to do that. We also opened our phone lines and basically established a phone line just for complaints, you know, complaints from citizens of Rock Hill. In that time frame, which I believe now has been about 3 months, we've had 8 or 9 complaints, with a couple of them being from the same resident.
Chairman, just to note on your monitors and on the projection system, the building facility is right here, and you have our Deer Creek running along through the rear. And then there's an apartment complex and then some residential on the other side of McKnight.
Yeah, those apartment complexes are probably our closest residential neighbors, both on that southwest side, and then there's some more apartments to the north as well. So we do have some neighbors, some residential neighbors that are fairly close, although I don't know that they're quite as close as the site at 1220 North Price.
The testing that you did you use a direct reading instrument or did you send it off for laboratory analysis?
No, it's a direct reading instrument. Excuse me. The name, it's a Honeywell device. I could give you the name of the device if that matters at all to you, but it's a Honeywell Mini Ray 3000 PID/VOC detector.
Well, let me go back to. In this area here, you'll see this is the area that you're looking at. And there's kind of a U shape, and this is where they have there's an existing tenant here. Plans we have kind of indicate stay. So they're showing this area here and then around this area.
Yeah, it seems like on the far right, that's where they hold flowering.
And then this is a back view of that same.
There we go. That's a little better.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, if I
Go
may.
ahead.
Carlos, if we wanted to visit that facility, is that something that we would work through you to coordinate? How would you propose?
I would have to check into that to determine sunshine law requirements and how that would be coordinated, or whether there's an opportunity to do it in individual groups.
Right. Yeah, but we may need to not agree not to discuss it during the visit or something like
Now,
that.
if it happens in specific times, and this is all by individuals, we can find out the times or occurrences, and you can drive by there on your own or in groups, without, at your own person, your own time.
We could create a
If
subcommittee
you want to go
to go
in the
out and
facility,
report.
that's something I'd have to check.
I don't think we need to go in. I think we just need to stand on
Right.
the sidewalk and stand 20 feet away, 30 feet away during that time and walk around the building and see what we want to do.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. My one question is Matt, can you speak on the security at this facility?
Yeah, I would love to. We've got currently 2 armed security guards on staff during the day, and we've got one armed security guard on staff 24 hours a day. We've got, I think it's about 150 cameras throughout the facility. We take security really seriously. Our director of security is a former St. Louis police officer. Almost everybody that we employ, we use a third-party Campbell Security Group, but almost all of the guards that we have at any of our facilities are either ex-law enforcement or ex-military, and oftentimes both. But we do have pretty extensive security, probably to the degree that you would see, at probably higher than the degree you would see at most casinos. And we take security very seriously, because we value, the community, and we value our workforce too. We've got about 100 people that work out of that Rock Hill facility on a daily basis.
Out of curiosity, and I don't know the answer, do they carry sidearms?
Yes, they do.
Any other further questions or comments to the petitioner? I think let's maybe see if we have any public comments that we need to kind of discuss. Ma'am, do you have some? Please remember to state your name and address for the record if you don't mind.
Barb Grenzick, 1217 Olivet Drive. If I only have 3 minutes, it's going to be rough.
Yeah.
I live at 1217 Olivet. That is at the back of that facility. I don't have a problem with this facility at all, to tell you the truth. And I have a scientific background. I'm very familiar. And, smells is the worst thing. If it's light, you can really see it. If it's odor, or if it's, you can hear things, but smells, I wouldn't be worried about the prevailing winds. It's when it's cloudy and it's overcast and everything it won't go anywhere. That's, I don't know whether, hello, Matt. Whether, I'm assuming that the dock doors, whether you said they come near outdoors. Well, the dock doors are on the east side of the west side of the building. South side of the building. I'm on their east side. There's only one door on that side, on the one long side, only one small door that one of the previous owners used to use to let their employees go out and take smoke breaks and that kind of thing.
Did you smell the smoke?
What?
Did you smell the smoke?
Did I smell the smokes?
Yeah.
Well, no, we had other problems there. They had to, behind one house, they had to install a 9-foot fence because there were certain gentlemen that would come out, and the next door neighbor has a pool, and they would harass the girls that were swimming in the pool.
Oh, geez.
That was something different.
Well,
But,
we promise not to do that, Barb.
That's good. The one issue I had doesn't have anything to do with that. It's more a request, was the trees and the dead trees that are on that side of the property, which is for me is a very tough situation. We've already had electric gone once because a dead tree fell down. We don't have anything on trees, but I think it'd be a wonderful idea. I'd love to go down and take a tour of that facility. That's my background, is, as I said, is biochemistry and smells. If I can smell it, probably my husband would never smell it. His nose is dead. I don't know why, but I could smell it. And with this, it might be something that I understand you would get complaints. Sometimes I would imagine people smell something. It might or might not be from their facility, but it's a convenient complaint line.
Mhm.
So I want us to all have an open mind about this facility. But I think it'd be great. Something different. Yeah, it's something completely different. It would require, armed guards. We don't have that on very many of our, I don't think, maybe banks, but our facilities. But yeah, the odors, I grew up on a farm. I'm familiar with greenhouses. I'm assuming a lot of the smells would be the smells that you get in a greenhouse. And sometimes and whatever fertilizers they use. So, and you can smell, and they can be nuisance smells, but they're fine for your health. It's not going to impact that at all. So I just encourage you to use your open mind, and I encourage Matt to continue with this, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I also will say, though, that I'm a homeowner, been there since '82, But 4 of the houses on our, yep, there's only 5 houses on my street. 3 of them are rentals, and I can guarantee you they won't care at all what happens there. Either the people that live there or the owners of the house. And the one other owner is down towards the far end of the manufacturing part of that facility. But go for it.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Barb.
Can we have another comment here, please?
Hi, my name is Leah Bernstein. I'm at 8822 Iroquois Drive. Barb was a decades-long trustee of our Arrowhead Park neighborhood, and I am a current one, a couple of years in. I really, really appreciated the professionalism and the consideration that this company has shown the neighbors and the dialogue that's already begun. John Pennington came to our last trustee meeting and made a presentation. I would love to have an information letter, not like the PowerPoint that was handed out, but something more just real nuts and bolts. You know, this issue probably will arise, and here's a number to call. And I can, you know, the trustees can supplement that with and call us too. Have you had any remedies that you have found to mitigate the odor or complement it into oblivion?
So far, our best success has been just throwing more filtration at the issue. And so we originally designed the facility, and we take design really seriously. As a matter of fact, we just Greenway Magazine, which is probably the largest cannabis publication, just named us best commercial cultivation facility design and best manufacturing facility design. This week, those awards came out. So we take design really seriously.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So when you talk about design, are there any sort of tiles, you know, like there are soundproofing tiles for gymnasiums? Are there any kind of odor proofing or absorbent tiles for ceilings or walls? And I asked that because my dad used to be in the soda and liquor distribution business, and they existed at that time. I don't know what the condition of that is now. I don't know if
I have never, sorry, I've never personally heard of them, but we'd certainly be interested in exploring them. We've had the greatest success with carbon filtration and moving a lot of air more than we originally designed through those carbon filters. And not just doing that inside the flower rooms, but doing it outside of entryways, dock doors, and in the just general areas of the building. And so we really just tried to take that approach and really use it in sort of an overkill type fashion. And so far, that has seemed to mitigate most of the odors and certainly reduce any sort of complaints. We have gotten very few lately. So it feels like we're on the right track there. But as I said earlier, we're committed to kind of continuing to improve in that area, in all areas, but we want to be a good neighbor. So we're, you know, the last thing we want is to move into Olivet and have folks unhappy that we're there for any reason. So I'll look into the tiles. It's actually an interesting concept. I had not heard of those.
Yeah, it's less efficient probably than filtration systems, because unless you can clean the tiles and sort of start fresh. So I heard you too. I like to think are there any odors that complement and thus reduce sort of the intensity of the pot? Like I know when, well, okay, I'm going to date myself now. Circa crossing Delancey, Sam the Pickle Man would wash his hands with vanilla to get rid of the pickle odor.
Mm-hmm. I don't. Admittedly, I don't know. I don't know the reference, but I don't know the reference, but I do. I do understand it. I don't know that there are any that complement or combat it specifically. There is a group, as I mentioned, that does kind of spray this mist just along the perimeter of the building. There, they'll tell you it's a proprietary mix. And it's got maybe a faint odor, but it's not a perfumey or it doesn't feel like much of a masking agent that they're using. So we don't know exactly what it is, but they have showed us case studies in which they had big cultivation facilities and greenhouses that they installed these systems, and they were pretty successful. So it's an idea that we've talked about at our Rock Hill facility, and certainly one that we would be open to exploring here too.
I think, we're really close. I mean, it's right there. I think it's right next to your. So, I would love to have some suggestions, even for the neighbors to kind of mitigate it themselves if they, boil cinnamon or, something that, that can naturally, healthfully, combat the odor. Do you ever find that the odor has actually drawn people in a zombie-like apocalypse way to your facility? We've had armed guards for them.
Well, we've actually gotten a rare compliment here and there. It's odors. Like we said, odors are pretty subjective. We had the guy who picks up the trash mentioned something about it the other day and asked if that's what we did inside. And we said, yeah, that is what we do. He said, I just thought there was people around here smoking. Anyways, he said, keep it up, that he liked the smell. So you get some folks that love it and some that hate it. Luckily, we haven't had any sort of zombie movement towards the facility just yet. But we do have the guards.
Well, thank you. That's, again.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Matt, I do have one question, and I was curious about the wall construction. Is it concrete walls or are they metal? walls?
The rooms within the facility.
The rooms as well as the exterior walls. Yeah, the around the perimeter. Because, sheet metal walls tend to be, allow airflow. They're a little bit more looser, as opposed to like solid concrete walls. You can kind of control those rooms or those areas better.
Yeah, I think we have both at that facility. Internally, we use metal studs with spray foam insulation and drywall. And then we treat the drywall with kind of a anti-mold, antimicrobial paint. But I believe the facility itself does have both. I'm looking at pictures now, and there's pieces that do seem to be concrete, and then other pieces that are steel walls. It's a pretty interesting building if you guys haven't seen that facility.
Go ahead, Carol.
First, I had a question on the special permit. I like the idea of using a special permit on this. I think that's a great idea. And I'm wondering if you put some kind of a provision in the special permit, and I'm just winging it here, say to review conditions in 6 months or a year and see if there's areas where, there's some other mitigation that may be necessary, or if the neighbors are, no, we've never had any complaints, or, try to check on the status of things, how things are working.
Yeah, and
Otherwise, whatever we think up at this point, we don't know how effective it's going to be really until it's actually in use.
Especially since the technology is constantly changing. There
Right.
might be something that is developed next year that is going to be a complete solution.
Good questions, and if I can try to address that, maybe Matt, you can add on to this. So the mitigation plan that they put forward to us for review, and what the commission is going to take a look at and incorporate as part of that special permit. So that gives you that regulatory authority to ensure that there's a compliance aspect in there. First, and I think they did a nice job in terms of, there's a facility design and odor mitigation plan. What they're indicating to the city is that they will provide the opportunity for the city and I think here to review the plans that are proposed for the mitigation purposes, and also provide the city the opportunity to hire a third-party consultant to assist us in that review, to ensure that they're using, not to say to ensure, to assess the mitigation, the way they're proposing to mitigate the building itself, and what they would provide, whether it's the scrubbers or the ceilings, ceiling meaning with an S, ceiling, and all that nature. And again, this is beyond my expertise, but this gives at least us or myself that opportunity to get that outside assistance in there. And here's also for the commission that opportunity to assess this to see if there's anything else that should be added to it. But again, they're willing to collaborate with the city on and provide us an opportunity to review the schematics and the plans of how they're going to mitigate and control the odors within the building itself, and how that design takes place, and give us the opportunity to hire some expertise to assist us in that evaluation. So that's part one. Part two then says creates an odor detection and management plan. So they put together a process or procedure. So these concerns could be, how they would be taken in, how the records would be kept, how they will be reviewed, how we'll receive reports of those records, and then how they'll continue to monitor those over time. And then the third component and final component is that annually we would sit down and review how's it working. And I think that might be where what you're addressing is, if it's not working, what are is there new technology or other things that can be incorporated? And again, that's a quick review of what you've been presented today. The goal tonight is for you to kind of take it in and review it and assess it, so we can have a more direct discussion or understanding of it at our next meeting. And it's up to the commission where they want to go from that point. But I think the content of that mitigation plan has been pretty well thought out. And I think it puts us in a position, again, to be partners in this design for the mitigation of the building, to establish a process, a well-written process, in terms of how we'll collect that data and what's going to happen with the data and all that, who's responsible. And there may be other opportunities to expand that or share that information in there. And then again, to have that annual review. And the goal tonight was, again, is to get that commission input or expertise into that. If there's anything we should consider or look at or add to this process. If the commission were to act and incorporate this mitigation plan into that special permit and the council is adopted by ordinance, again, before they start, they won't necessarily be coming back to the commission, but they'll be coming back to the city to sit down and talk about, these are the things we're going to do. And again, we have the ability to hire an outside expertise to help us in the review and analysis of what these things are, what they're doing, and are these the best management practices that are available to that extent too. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong or overstating it, but that's an overall view of what you guys have put together for us to consider.
No, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think, yeah, all of these things that we laid out are, these are the steps that we're willing to take, not just upfront and initially, but, over the course of time and continuously, and, as part of a commitment to being a good neighbor.
Mr. Chairman, may I just make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
It seems to me like the real challenge with this is going to be striking the right balance where the special use permit has enough teeth. And Matt, this is not meant in any way to question the conviction that you have in being a good neighbor. I believe that genuinely. But from our perspectives, balancing the special use permit and having teeth to make sure that we can stand up for the rights of our citizens if this, let's say it's just totally noxious. There's a rotten egg
Mhm.
smell floating
Sure.
over those houses every day.
Sure.
The special use permit has enough teeth that we can do something about that. While at the same time respecting the fact that Matt's coming in here and investing a lot of money into a facility that's he doesn't want to be kicked out tomorrow if he drops hundreds of thousands of dollars getting or millions getting this facility together. So that seems, I don't have a good answer sitting here today, but that seems like the real challenge is making sure that this special use permit has sufficient teeth to make sure that those improvements are meaningfully pursued, but not make it so draconian that it disincentivizes Matt to even bother coming here in the first place.
Go ahead, Missy.
Matt, this is Missy Walden with the City of Olivet. I heard you, I read the material that came through. And I heard you just kind of talk about what you've done in some of your other facilities, charcoal filter system, in the room and the other areas inside the building. And I'm hearing staff and the board talk about special use permit and mitigation plan. So my question to you is, when you build these, or when you're gonna, if you're gonna come here and you're gonna become a business in our city, in your current mitigation design, do you automatically put work filtration systems in, or is this what you would say you would do if the reports of odors are more consistent? So I just want that clarification. Is it something you automatically do, this work filtration charcoal system filter, or is it if we are emitting and we get too many complaints?
Sure, thanks, Missy. It's a great question. This is part of our day one design. We wouldn't build a facility in Olivet or any other municipality without an odor mitigation plan in place. The state requires an odor mitigation plan. It was part of our initial application with the state when we applied a few years ago. So any facility that we build, there will be an odor mitigation plan in place that will include the things that we've talked about, including and probably most notably the charcoal filtration, both in and outside of the rooms. So yeah, that's not something that's reactionary. That's something that we will put in place regardless of where we are or what facility we're building. That's something that's a part of the initial design.
Hey, Matt, how often do you change those charcoal filters?
With those canned charcoal filters in the cultivation facility, we change them every cycle, which is typically about 2 or 3 times quicker than what most manufacturer recommendations are. But we change them out in our flowering rooms every cycle, so every 8 weeks, basically.
Every 8 weeks. And
Mhm.
those, each flowering room is under negative pressure compared to the outside, right? So do you
Mhm.
measure that, or is it just kind of based on the fan that's there? Do you test to see, check how much negative pressure you actually have?
We don't check it currently. Just based off of the facility design, and we kind of leave that up to experts. In terms of our mechanical engineers and facility designers, we don't test the negative pressure, but we do have that in our flower rooms.
And I wasn't sure if that was maybe a reason why sometimes odors would vary, on and off.
Sure, and there's times where again, and I referenced the harvest days. The doors are open. We've got folks going in and out of the rooms because they're pulling plants out of those rooms and hanging those plants to dry. And it certainly would explain why on those days we tend to experience slightly stronger odors than we would on the days where the rooms primarily stay closed and sealed.
Well, 1 minute too. Let me just check. Carlos, do we have any other public comments on Zoom?
Not that I've seen, no, sir.
Okay.
It's only staff.
Only staff, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a question concerning the first, your other facility. So are there in the rooms with the highest concentrations of smell, are there separate exhaust fans in those rooms separate from the air handling system?
There are, yep, there are separate exhaust fans in those rooms, and that all those exhaust fans that are pulling air out to maintain that negative pressure, those are all affixed with those charcoal filters as well.
They go out through the roof or it just?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Question I had. And what's the turnover of the air volume turnover? What's it, you know?
I honestly, I don't know what the CFM of those fans are and how quickly they turn those rooms over. Those rooms are
That's okay. You don't have to.
2,250
I
square
can probably
feet.
find out. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, yeah, we could get you an answer.
Good, good. Good. Okay, any other questions or comments? I think it would be worthwhile if we could set up sometime for us to kind of check out the owner.
We'll coordinate with Matt and John Pennington.
Yeah, yeah, that would be good. Okay. Good, good. Matt, thank you very much. Appreciate it and appreciate the education.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. We appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Good, so let's move on to, it is 10 o'clock.
Chairman, and I'd be glad to finalize right now. I do ask one request, is we received the application for solar panel installation. It complies with the city standards, but I always bring this to your attention before we issue a permit. And the reason is, it's a property at Arrowhead and Iroquois. They're placing solar panels at the where the property kind of turns. It's a corner, but the streets kind of change things here. And it's a small set of solar panels compared to what you typically would see. In there, they are facing the street. They are dark colored panels to match the character. And again, and they are parallel with the roof line. But what we've done in the past is always bring it to the commission's attention. I just wanted to do that. The permit has been sitting for a while, so.
Anybody have any concerns with solar panels on the front of the house?
No concern.
I know that I was looking at putting solar panels on the front and I kind of pulled my neighbors, and stuff because my south facing is there. Unfortunately, you get a mixed bag, of people that decided. I think most people generally kind of applaud the effort, you know what I mean? But some people do consider it an eyesore. I don't have any problems with it. I think it's a good use. I'm not sure how everybody else feels.
I have no problem.
Okay.
That's all I have. Our next meeting is scheduled March 17th. We do have, I believe, about 4 or 5 single-family homes that are scheduled for that docket. We'll have the Gilman Townhouse project back on, and then we'll work with the developer regarding the illustration to make sure that we back to the docket. For that, any questions on the work on the corridor? Everything seems to be moving pretty well. Anything out of the ordinary, councilperson, if you do.
I will just indicate, as I did last time, that the city council is still looking at the $1.4 million that we're going to be getting from the ARPA funds. The city staff has done a wonderful job with giving some recommendations to us. Top priority of recommendations, the North Price Olive intersection, Northern Leg. And that is kind of looking at the ability of purchasing some land there to be able to give it that extra turn lane. I think the council is giving their blessings to the increase in that ARPA funding that was recommended last night by 2 nights ago by the city manager. Funding for multimodal pedestrian cycle, some funding for the wayfinding signs in the city, not all, but some funding for the comprehensive plan. that you guys are gonna begin to get busy with. Yoo-hoo, waha, yes, let's go. We're gonna have some funding for some good software equipment that clearly that $11,000 will be forthcoming to the city twofold because of the software. Some Olive Boulevard Great Streets consideration, data management, business licensing, building upgrades at the Public Works Building. Mr. McGregor and his son has done a wonderful job throughout the years of upgrading that since Carlos and his staff got to move to this wonderful building that the citizens approved. And that would be upgrading of electrical replacements in that building, which we don't really have another place in our community to relocate our public works. And that's kind of some of the things that we're looking at for the ARPA funds. Okay. Besides that, you've got an election coming up in the beginning of April. Rick Knox and myself are running for re-election. And just again, I appreciate everything you do. You got a hard task. I know sometimes we frustrate people, but as we've heard and as we've said before, once something is built, it's permanent. And we have to make sure that it's the best on behalf of for our city. So I know I argue with you guys from time to time as well, but you know, your job is important. And I appreciate sometimes when you gotta sit there and say, we still don't have enough. We like what we're seeing. So I appreciate your review and y'all have a good weekend. It's gonna be nice.
All right, good. I think we'll adjourn at 10:08.